Magical World War I. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326. I promise I will never lose my temper again. Charlotte unwrapped the package and took out the butcher and killer whales. Anne's eyes were full of disbelief, and she asked in surprise, "Is this spear the legendary whale killer?" Charlotte said indifferently, "Yes. I got it from a pirate, and the quality is quite good." Anne said, "The legendary whale killer and whale slaughterer were made by an unknown holy alchemist. When used alone, they are just ordinary high-level extraordinary weapons and mid-level extraordinary weapons, but if they are combined, they will have a wonderful supernatural power. When someone holds one of the spears, there will be a shadow knight holding another knight's spear to assist in the battle." Charlotte was shocked and said, "Annie, how do you know?" Anne said with a little pride, "I have done my homework." Charlotte muttered a little, and did not dare to ask any more questions. He didn't know that the full version of Anne's sentence was, "I have done my homework on all your trophies," but the man's sixth sense made him wisely choose another topic and mention the novels they co-authored. Speaking of novels, Anne's eyes suddenly lit up and said, "Charlotte, you don't know how popular your novels are. Now, it is not only sold in Fars, but also in Ingrima, Lionheart Dynasty, and even in Baron and Black Phoenix Dynasty. It is even more popular in other small countries." Charlotte smiled and said, "It is because of you, Anne, that these novels are sold well. I am just sitting back and enjoying the fruits of your labor." Anne knew that Charlotte was just saying nice things. These novels are popular because the original authors write well. She still talked about the various difficulties encountered in publishing novels. For example, she couldn't find a suitable publisher, so she had to buy one herself. At first, some bookstores were unwilling to sell, so she had to spend a lot of money to acquire several bookstores. Today, Anne is already the owner of 3 multinational publishers and nearly 20 chain bookstores, but for the young lady of Brittany, this is not an achievement worth showing off. Of course, there are some things that Anne will not talk about with Charlotte, such as the extra chapters of Du Wei and Prince Chen. Charlotte didn't expect that Anne had already started the road to being a successful businesswoman before she started her business. If there was an author on earth who dated a rich woman who owned a large comic platform, I'm afraid he would wake up laughing in his dreams. The various businessmen he organized were not actually doing business, but engaging in trade monopoly. When they occupied land resources, caravans, fleets, and cargo resources, what they needed was not a business mind, but a strong background. Although the Knights of Favonius, which Charlotte created, is not very powerful, it is no less powerful than an ordinary imperial noble. As a dream walker, Anne is not good at hand-to-hand combat on the extraordinary path, and she has never thought of taking the 2 knight lances for herself. She just wants to hang them on the wall of 221B Baker Street in Val d'Oise, next to her magic oil paintings, and then invite a few girlfriends to have afternoon tea. She always feels very happy when she is with Charlotte. Especially happy today. Charlotte didn't quite understand this, and he didn't know why Anne seemed so happy, happier than the first few days when he came back. He ordered a few cups of coffee and a barrel of beer, and chatted with Anne for a while, when suddenly someone outside the door shouted loudly, "Is Miss Brittany home?" "I'm the postman." When Charlotte first traveled through time and returned from Sennis, she had sent her gifts to the imperial post for shipment, and she had also received letters from her brother, but he seldom used the imperial post. After all, it was too slow. He preferred to have his knights ride as fast as they could to Strasbourg to deliver the manuscript of the novel he recited. In other cases, he hardly ever used the post. Anne's pretty face flushed slightly. She had marked her mailing address as 221B Baker Street, and she had always believed that this was the love nest of her and Charlotte, but when she was asked, "Is Miss Brittany home?" she would still feel a little shy, especially when Charlotte was still around, but besides being shy, she also felt a little sweet. She sometimes thought that in a few years, the two might really get married. They would live at 221B Baker Street, and friends would often come to visit, and she would receive guests as Lady Mecklen, but she was still too shy. Charlotte was a little curious and said, "I'll go out with you." Anne was a little less embarrassed, and they went out together. Sure enough, a man in the uniform of the imperial post handed over a letter respectfully. Charlotte gave him a centime and said, "Thank you, The postman was very happy and thanked them again and again. Charlotte and Anne returned to 221B. Anne opened the email, and there was a document inside. When she opened the document, her face changed slightly, and she was surprised. How could this happen? I just graduated, how could I become a first-class counselor of the 24th class? Is there something wrong? Charlotte smiled slightly and took the email. Sure enough, there was another document inside, which was the one he gave to the Earl of Brittany, saying, I know the inside story. Anne was a little surprised and asked, what inside story? Charlotte took out a document from the email, handed it to Anne, and said, originally, the Earl asked me to keep it secret from you so that you can have a surprise, but the new job appointment documents have arrived, so there is no need to hide it. He told Anne everything about the Lionheart dynasty giving the two positions. Anne immediately realized that it was her father who manipulated this matter. He used the position of the Lionheart dynasty to let himself directly cross the insurmountable class in the Fars Empire and become a first-class counselor of the 24th class. This is definitely the beginning of a legend. Anne put down the document and said affectionately, this is all thanks to you, my Mr. Charlotte Mecklen. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, then I have to thank Ms. Black Moon. Well, and the Serpent of Destiny, you brought the love of my life to me in a wonderful way. If it weren't for the guidance of the gods and fate, I'm afraid I would have missed a truly happy life. I can't even imagine, if there hadn't been the misunderstanding back then, where would I have met my Anne? Anne became more and more shy, her eyes full of affection, and whispered, I promise I will never lose my temper in the future. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, I've never seen you lose your temper. How can a girl as gentle as you have a bad temper? Charlotte asked curiously, in addition to your position. Don't you have a political identity? Anne glanced at the document and said, yes, I do. Chapter 327 Executive Officer of the Military Law Enforcement Department of the Central Government Office. Anne whispered, it's the Executive Officer of the Military Law Enforcement Department of the General Office of the Central Government. Charlotte couldn't help but smile, thinking, there will be a wife in the Law Enforcement Department in the future. Anne was born in the Brittany family. Now the Brittany family is very powerful, not inferior to several dukes in the empire. The Count of Brittany is the strongest in the Fars Empire, and his private knights are the strongest in the world. This Miss Brittany started as a 24th class first-level political participant, and she also worked in the Military Law Enforcement Department of the General Office of the Central Government. She can be called the most dazzling political star in the empire. This is the power of a big family. Charlotte fought hard and made countless contributions, but she barely crossed the insurmountable class. Anne can easily cross it with just a piece of paper from the Lionheart dynasty. Of course, Charlotte will never be jealous of Anne. He is too happy about this. He whispered, Annie, you finally have a job. I have prepared a gift for you. Anne was surprised and happy, but she muttered in her heart, I wonder what the gift is. He won't give me a supernatural weapon, will he? Charlotte went upstairs, took down a box, and whispered, this is the floating world flower. When I got it on the battlefield, I thought it was very suitable for Anne. Charlotte opened the box. There was a flower crown in the box. The flowers were colorful and wild, not luxurious, but just better looking than ordinary flower crowns. Anne was very happy. Although she was not a delicate girl, she still liked the supernatural and wonderful things like the floating world flower more. Charlotte introduced, when you wear it on your head, there will be colorful flowers lingering, slowly rising into the air, and you can fly on the flowers. Anne smiled slightly and thought, I have already investigated this supernatural and wonderful thing, but I didn't expect that he wanted to give it to me. This gift is probably the most romantic one he has ever had. Charlotte personally put the flower crown on Anne's head. Anne, as the West Wind goddess of Gorgeous University, is of course a first-class beauty. Wearing this extraordinary and wonderful object, she is even more beautiful and stunning. She is really like a goddess who has walked out of history and descended to the mortal world. Although Charlotte has known Anne for a long time, she still couldn't help being slightly dazed, thinking, is this the highest reward for a time traveler? A time traveler can rely on power, strength, or even systems, plug-ins, adventures, or even just being born with a girl, such as having a little maid when traveling, to win the favor of girls, but it is rare to win the favor of girls just by having ordinary interactions. And noticed that Charlotte was in a daze, and couldn't help but smile, which made her even more charming. Charlotte couldn't help but sigh. Anne is indeed my goddess. Anne whispered, I am willing to be the west wind goddess of Mr. Charlotte Mecklin alone." Charlotte's heart was greatly moved. Well, Anne still didn't stay and have dinner with him. This time, Charlotte personally sent Anne back to 58, 6th Avenue, Val d'Oise. If it were before, Charlotte would never dare to do so. But now he was very bold and waved goodbye to Anne in front of this mansion representing the top nobles of the empire. When Anne got off the car to go home, Charlotte also saw Aunt Karen, who welcomed Miss Brittany home, and smiled at him and performed a lady's daily greeting. Charlotte's heart was surging. His first dream since crossing over seemed to be within his reach. Get promoted, get rich, marry a beautiful and rich woman. In fact, it's not easy. Charlotte went through life and death, and I don't know how many battles he went through before he achieved the current results. Charlotte drove the dark luxury and returned to 58, Champs-Élysées. When he got home, he ordered, "Mrs. Plum sauce, prepare a dinner for me. Any dish is fine, as long as you are good at it, I can eat it." Mrs. Nancy and Mrs. Plumsauce knew Charlotte's habits. No matter how late he came back, he usually had dinner alone, because Anne would hardly eat dinner with him. Mrs. Nancy brought a bucket of beer and filled it for Charlotte, saying, "Mrs. Plumsauce bought some beef today. It has been marinated and will be grilled and sent to you soon." Charlotte smiled and said, "Very good." For these two middle-aged women, Charlotte was an excellent customer. The wages were quite high and paid on time, never in arrears. Occasionally, when he asked them to do some personal things, he would always give them a sum of money, and never used people for nothing. As Charlotte's position became higher and higher, the two ladies cherished this job especially. The golden goat Herolf strode over and sat opposite Charlotte, looking like he wanted to have dinner together. Charlotte was worried about her safety, so she left a mission to Dorothy, but brought the old goat back. These days, the golden goat Rolf also lives at number 58, Élysée Field Street. The old goat still never speaks, and even ignores Mrs. Nancy and Mrs. Wu Mizijiang. The two ladies did not dare to provoke this fierce guy. They didn't know why Charlotte's master brought back such an old guy who never spoke, had a stinky face, and looked like he had been cheated of all his property. Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "If you're hungry, you can ask Mrs. Wu Mizijiang for something to eat." The old goat didn't say a word. He was hungry a long time ago, but in order to maintain his silent personality, he just waited until Charlotte came back. Charlotte said to Mrs. Nancy, "Let Mrs. Wu Mizijiang prepare one more portion. He will be our old housekeeper in the future. If I'm not here, remember to prepare 3 meals for him every day." Mrs. Nancy didn't know why the master would get such a person as a housekeeper. But she was not a talkative person, so she went downstairs to ask Mrs. Wu Mizijiang to make an extra dinner. Charlotte poured a glass of beer for the golden goat Herolf, and seeing the old goat said nothing, grabbed the glass and drank it all in one gulp. He simply lowered the whole barrel of beer to him, and the old goat drank by himself, which was quite heroic. Charlotte looked at it for a while, smiled slightly, and took out 3 golden rings. He already knew these 3 golden rings. One was used to control St. Michael's Island, one was used to control the queen bee, and he didn't know what the other one was used for. Of course, he could ask the golden goat Herolf, but he just thought that it would be interesting to study it when he had nothing to do. When he couldn't figure it out, it wouldn't be too late to ask the old goat for the answer. When the golden goat Herolf saw the 3 rings, he choked and coughed after taking a sip of beer. These 3 rings are the eternal pain in the old goat's heart. Back then, he had these 3 golden rings, owned St. Michael Island, the queen bee, a magic alchemy warship, tens of thousands of pirates, and dozens of ships. How arrogant was he? But now, the old goat's heart was bleeding. He watched Charlotte fiddle with it for a while, put away the other 2 golden rings, and only left one to study repeatedly. He also took a few books that he had recently borrowed from the Sheffield University Library, looked up information, and studied with relish. The heart of the golden goat Herolf was like being blocked by a big stone. How could Charlotte be studying the golden rings? This was trampling on his dignity, provoking his will, showing off his victory, and ruthlessly poking the heart of the saint-level strongman who was once ranked among the top 10 pirates and was known as the king of the giant whale sea. Charlotte didn't even ask where the divine creature was, nor did she ask where his life savings were hidden. Originally, the golden goat Herolf thought that if Charlotte pressed him, he would rather resist the suppression of the master-servant's contract and keep these secrets, but Charlotte didn't ask at all, just studied it by herself, which made him feel uncomfortable. "Why the hell don't you come and beat me?" The old goat did have a psychological problem. However, it shouldn't be depression. It's Stockholm Syndrome, commonly known as hostage identification syndrome. It's the kind of psychological disease that will actively provide help to the perpetrator. The old goat was struggling, whether to maintain his silent personality or tell Charlotte the secret of the third gold ring. Charlotte suddenly shouted in surprise, "I know." He put away the gold ring and closed the borrowed book. Mrs. Wu Mizijiang happened to bring dinner at this time. Charlotte didn't mention anything and ate dinner with relish. Mrs. Wu Mizijiang also prepared a portion for the golden goat Roth, but the old goat ate it without any taste, and kept asking himself, "He knows it now? I didn't tell him. How could he know? He must be lying to me so that I can't tell him this big secret. Hey, I'll write this secret down tomorrow. I want to see what his expression is." The old goat thought of a solution, which allowed him to remain silent and tell Charlotte the secret of the third golden ring, and he immediately felt better. Mrs. Wu Mizijiang's cooking skills are indeed very good, and the beef she bought is also of high quality, roasted with smooth fat and soft in the mouth. Charlotte ate very happily, and ate several kilograms of beef, which made him feel satisfied. He drank a large glass of beer and thought to himself, "It's time to practice." Since he crossed over, he has never stopped practicing, and daily practice has become his must-do homework. Charlotte looked at the golden goat Rolf, who was still struggling with the beef, and couldn't help feeling happy. She thought to herself, "I will have a saint-level butler in the future. Although this former pirate leader is rude and not as well educated as Sister Karen, he is quite capable after all. I am the son of a merchant, and I am fine with a saint-level butler. I can't be picky about anything." Charlotte touched her chin and gave a fairly fair evaluation of the old goat. He was full, so of course he had no interest in accompanying the old goat. He left the butler and went upstairs to rest. Since Charlotte heard the whispers of the Serpent of Destiny, his cultivation speed has begun to advance by leaps and bounds. He practiced for several hours at his usual pace. When the blood energy in his body was transformed into bloody glory again, he suddenly felt a slight shock in his back, and another bloody vortex was formed. Before Charlotte, he had already opened up 9 bloody vortices, representing 9 different vampire clans. Among them, the bloody vortex of the Duolian clan still had no bloody runes. The 10th bloody vortex was opened, and no bloody runes were condensed at the same time. This bloody vortex belonged to the Aristicles clan. Charlotte felt it for a while and was very happy. He transformed the bloody glory into the star fighting spirit. Sure enough, under the increase of the 9 bloody vortices, the star fighting spirit broke through the 13th level. This also means that Charlotte has officially stepped into the extraordinary high level. Charlotte opened his arms and looked at the star fighting spirit flowing on his body. He couldn't help but whispered, "Sooner or later, I will step into the holy level and become a real big man in this world." He felt it for a while, and reversed the star fighting spirit, turning it into bloody glory again, and then went to bed as usual. When Charlotte got up the next day, Anne came to find him. Seeing Charlotte, she couldn't help but smile and said, "I got my graduation certificate in advance today. I have to report to the Law Enforcement Department of the General Office of the Central Government. Can you go with me?" Charlotte nodded and smiled. Of course, this time, he did not use the dark luxury and asked Mrs. Nancy to prepare a carriage. Well, this is a little bit of Charlotte's bad taste. Although to Anne, this is just an ordinary second-hand carriage, but to many people, this is showing off wealth, this is showing off, and it will also make many people guess Anne's identity, thus creating awe. But if you ride in a second-hand carriage driven by Mrs. Nancy, many interesting things may happen. Although after Anne showed her inauguration documents, no one would dare to provoke the young lady of Brittany, this little bad taste will not last long. But, well, this is very Charlotte. Anne didn't care what kind of carriage she took. To her, Charlotte's 2 carriages were really similar. When the 2 arrived at the General Office of the Central Government, Charlotte had a little feeling for her old unit. Just when he was about to accompany Anne in, he saw his old leader Mrs. Aldegand. At that time, Charlotte Mecklen worked as a first-level clerk in the General Office of the Central Government, and Mrs. Aldegand was his direct leader. This old-fashioned and dignified senior government worker couldn't help showing surprise when she saw Charlotte. Charlotte had been here several times before and had deliberately concealed her identity, but Lady Aldegand was the person in charge of various documents and soon found out Charlotte's real position. Moreover, as the war progressed, many things could no longer be concealed. Rumors about Charlotte had long been flying around in his original department. Lady Aldegon performed a daily greeting and said, "It's Lord Mecklen. You are here at the central government office today. Do you need my help to run an errand?" Charlotte was immediately disappointed and whispered, "Lady Aldegon, have you known my identity for a long time?" Lady Aldegon glanced at the second-hand old carriage the two of them got off and said lightly, "Even your carriage is called dark luxury, and everyone among your old colleagues knows it." Chapter 328 Mr. Elenskak must go to the front. Charlotte sighed and smiled slightly. Lady Aldegon was still a little old-fashioned, but the dignity she had always maintained was gone. There was no way. Lady Aldegon could only maintain her dignity in front of her subordinates, such as Charlotte in the past. But now Charlotte Mecklen was not her subordinate, but a big shot who was much higher in position than her. Charlotte suddenly felt that everything was in vain. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "Anne and I can handle it ourselves. We don't need Lady Aldegon's help." This lady was his old boss and had always taken good care of him at work. Later, when he returned to the central office, he asked this old boss for help once or twice, and Lady Aldegon did not refuse. It was impossible for him to boss this old boss around. Lady Aldegon bowed slightly and was about to leave. She actually had other things to do, but that thing was not urgent. She could help Charlotte with a small favor. Since the other party didn't need it, she would not be particularly flattering. Mrs. Aldegon has been working in the central government office for 22 years and has her own way of dealing with people. Charlotte thought about it, called the lady, and whispered, "And will work in the central government office in the future. You are an old clerk here. Please take care of her." Mrs. Aldegon smiled slightly, nodded, and said, "I am indeed experienced and can help Anne with a little work." This, Charlotte immediately replied, "Anne Brittany. She is going to the law enforcement department." "Well, Anne, what is your position?" Anne bowed lightly, thanked Mrs. Aldegon, and then whispered, "Executive Officer of the Military Law Enforcement Department of the Central Government Office." When Mrs. Aldegon heard that the lady's last name was Brittany, she felt a little daunted. When she heard that the lady was actually the Executive Officer of the Military Law Enforcement Department of the Central Government Office, her feet were confused for no reason, and she staggered for a while, and asked in shock, "What is your position?" Anne replied, 24th class first level political advisor." Mrs. Aldegon was in a state of panic. She was only a clerk of the 37th grade, a 5th level clerk, and she was far from even the chief clerk. She was extremely far away from the 24th grade, a first level political politician. To her, Anne was a real big shot. How could she take care of this young lady? Her boss's boss might have to bow his head and be trained in front of Anne, and dare not have the slightest rebellious look. This is an insurmountable class. Anne shook her head slightly. She knew that Charlotte would occasionally have a bit of bad taste. Although it was not as serious as her senior Dorothy Sue May, it was still worse. This Mrs. Aldegon seemed to be a very good person. Although Charlotte made a joke, her attitude was quite respectful. Obviously, when they were colleagues, their relationship was not bad, but rather quite harmonious. Charlotte asked Mrs. Aldegon to take care of her. In fact, she asked Anne to help take care of this old superior. Anne was a smart girl. She had heard what her boyfriend meant and planned to take care of this old-fashioned and serious lady. Mrs. Aldegon said apprehensively, "Miss Brittany, I just said something wrong." Anne smiled and said, "I just graduated from college and have almost no work experience. I really need your guidance in many areas. If you don't mind, how about I transfer you to the law enforcement department?" Mrs. Aldegon was overjoyed. She never thought that she would be promoted one day. She thought she would stay in the position of a level 5 clerk of the 37th grade until retirement. Charlotte and Anne said goodbye to this old-fashioned and serious lady. They went through several departments and stamped the appointment document. Then they went to the law enforcement department. Coincidentally, they met Alan's cook head-on. Alan's cook was originally a member of the logistics department. He was temporarily transferred to the law enforcement department because he was good at taxation. According to the unspeakable unspoken rules, he would be officially transferred to the law enforcement department after working for a period of time, and he could be promoted one level. Ellen's cook also has a promising future. She is born into an aristocratic family and has good looks. She is quite popular among the young ladies in the law enforcement department. He was chatting with two ladies as they walked out, preparing to have lunch together. When he saw Charlotte, his face darkened and he couldn't help but say, "Mr. Mecklen, Are you here to talk about the tax issue again? Sorry, it's lunch break and I'm closed for the time being." Anne hesitated slightly and looked at Charlotte. Charlotte smiled softly and ignored Alan's cook, but explained to Anne, "This Mr. Alan's cook doesn't like me, so he used his private power to investigate me several times and wanted to frame me for several crimes." Anne said, "Oh," and asked, "What is his position?" Charlotte replied, "It's still the 26th grade." He turned around and asked, "Mr. Alan's cook, have you been promoted recently?" Alan's cook didn't expect that the young man and woman would act as if no one was around. He said coldly, "Charlotte Mecklen, your arrogant days will not last long." He immediately left angrily with the two ladies, not even bothering to answer this humiliating question. He vowed to start an investigation and give Charlotte a hard time. Last time, he got a hint from the Duchess of Misu, asking him not to interfere in this matter. Aaron's cook had originally planned to listen to the words of this patron, but now he couldn't stand it anymore and must make Charlotte lose her reputation and even be expelled from the civil service. Anne didn't say anything, but accompanied by Charlotte, she went to meet the chief officer of the law enforcement department and confirmed her position and political identity. Charlotte wanted to invite her to lunch, but Anne smiled and refused, saying, "It's my first day at work, so I have to be more diligent. You can pick me up in the afternoon and we can have coffee together." Charlotte didn't understand why Anne suddenly became a workaholic, but still said that she would come in the afternoon, and then she left the law enforcement department of the general office of the central government. Charlotte wanted to find a place to relax, but suddenly remembered that many of her subordinates' positions were still in the same place, such as Dubin, who was still a poor third-level sergeant of the 47th grade, and she should also be busy with this matter. "Since I'm already at the general office of the central government, I might as well do these things." Charlotte hurried to visit several relevant departments, but she temporarily put aside her enemy, Alan's cook. Alan's cook had lunch, talked and laughed with two female colleagues, and returned to the law enforcement department. Just as he was about to take a lunch break, he would not work so hard, and someone brought him a document. Alan's cook said unhappily, "I want to take a lunch break and not work for the time being." The ordinary clerk of the law enforcement department said tremblingly, "It's not official business, you have been transferred." Alan's cook thought to himself, "Why was I transferred?" He pulled out the document, and it really said that he was transferred, and it was not an internal transfer, but he was transferred to Philandon, the largest meat grinder in the empire. Alan's cook felt a chill all over his body. He couldn't understand it all. He just went to have lunch. How could it turn out like this? He took a look at the name signed under the document. This name was very unfamiliar. It was not any of his familiar colleagues. The name was beautifully written, Anne Brittany. Alan's cook stood up and shouted, "Who is so blind? Transfer me away. I am Alan's cook. What do you want to do? Who signed this document?" "Anne Brittany." "Don't you want to work in the central government office?" Alan's cook's roar could be heard throughout the office. Many colleagues were shocked. I don't know why Alan's cook suddenly went crazy. When they heard that he was transferred, many people talked about it. I wonder who dared to offend this young man? Hearing Alan's cook shouting Anne's name, many people looked at this beautiful new colleague with complicated expressions. Anne stood up silently and said, "I signed a transfer order." Alan's cook shouted angrily, "I tell you to cancel this transfer order immediately. I'm not fucking going to Philandon. I see you don't want to do this anymore. Get out of the law enforcement department today." Anne smiled slightly. Many officers in the law enforcement department thought that this girl was very beautiful, but they were worried that she would be kicked out. After all, Alan's cook's background was too strong. A senior official came hurriedly and quickly found out what happened. He walked to Anne and said, "Although your last name is Brittany, you can't mess up your work. Quickly cancel this transfer." Anne said calmly, "No. Anyone in the empire has the obligation to go to the front line, Mr. Alan's cook. There is no reason to stay in the rear and avoid the war. It's time for him to serve the empire." The official sneered and said, "Miss Brittany, if you are unwilling to cancel this transfer order, you probably need to change your job." Anne took out her inauguration document, turned to the signature page, and slapped the official in the face, saying lightly, "If you think you are greater than this signature, give me a new job." The official took down the document angrily and saw that the signature on the document was Julius Axel. Anne's inauguration followed a special procedure, so her inauguration document was signed by His Majesty the Emperor himself, and it also had Julius Axel's personal seal and the seal of the Chief of Law Enforcement. which meant it could not be forged. Anne glanced at the stunned official, took back her inauguration documents, and said lightly, "I am Anne of Brittany, daughter of Count Brittany, and this inauguration document is signed by His Majesty Emperor Julius Axel. I say today, Mr. Aaron's cook must go to the front line. Who wants to stop me?" The law enforcement department was silent for a moment. Chapter 329. If apology works, who are you going to frame next time? The Bretons are a big family. There are at least hundreds of people with the surname Breton in Fars. Not every Breton has a strong background, but the daughter of the Count of Brittany is different. The West Wind goddess of Gorgias University is well known in the university, but after leaving the university, she is just a beautiful girl. Especially Anne doesn't like socializing at all, and is not as famous as the Strasbourg Rose Sophia Galanad. Seeing that Anne is young, the senior official just now wanted to scold her and force her to admit her mistake, but the document Anne showed him not only had the signature of His Majesty the Emperor, but also, Anne's position is higher than his. The head of the law enforcement department just stamped the last seal on Anne's document. He originally planned to announce to his colleagues in the afternoon that a beautiful lady had joined the company, but he didn't expect that such a big thing would happen before the lunch break. He walked out of the independent office, feeling a little embarrassed. The head of the law enforcement department of the central government office is definitely a high-ranking official in the empire, and he is considered to be in a high position and powerful, but he is determined not to get involved in the fight between the Duchess of Misou and the Count of Brittany. Alan's cook was stunned. He never expected that this new girl would have such a strong background. He suddenly reacted and shouted, "You are the girl with Charlotte," Anne said lightly, "Mr. Charlotte Mecklen has met my father, Mr. Alan's cook, what else do you want to say?" Alan's cook realized belatedly that when he went to investigate Charlotte, the Count of Brittany did not support him. At that time, he thought that the Count disliked him for messing around on the front line. Now he knows that Charlotte is the Count's own. He also understood why the Duchess of Misou told him to let Charlotte pay a fine of 3,000 Egyptian francs and then forbade him to continue the investigation. Alan's cook relied on the Duchess of Misou and thought that he was different and could do whatever he wanted. But now he finally realized that just because the Duchess of Misou could do whatever she wanted, it didn't mean he could do it too. Alan's cook suddenly realized that he was still a nobody. The Count of Brittany would fully support his daughter. But the Duchess of Misou would definitely not fully support him. He was just a junior of the Duchess of Misou, not her biological son. Alan's cook had a sad face and whispered, "I can apologize." Anne smiled faintly and said, "If apologies work, who are you going to frame next time?" And then continue to apologize. "I repeat, Mr. Alan's cook must go to the front line." The head of the law enforcement department took a deep breath. He had made a decision and stood up and said, "Men of the Fars Empire should go to the front line for the Empire. Mr. Alan's cook must go to the front line. You leave today." Charlotte had just finished a promotion of his subordinates and walked out of the central government office when he saw Alan's cook walking out in a daze. He casually gave him a not very friendly greeting. "Why do you look like a stray dog?" Alan's cook gritted his teeth and said, "You won, but don't think that you will always win. I will definitely find a way to start the investigation into you again." Charlotte smiled brightly and said, "In fact, there is no need to be so troublesome. Why don't we duel? Sign a formal duel document and find a witness each. If there's any grudge, let's find it on the rapier. Why bother with conspiracy and intrigue?" Charlotte didn't know that Anne had already hit Mr. Alan's cook hard. He thought this guy would cause trouble for him again. He was a little impatient and wanted to solve this problem simply. He had just been promoted to a senior position and wanted to find someone to try his hand. Although both of them were unarmed in the last fight, Charlotte didn't take any advantage and just slapped the other party a few times, but in a duel, weapons can be used. Charlotte believed that this guy was not her opponent. Alan's cook turned around and left angrily. He was not afraid of a duel, but he was not in the mood. He was about to be transferred to the front line of Philandon, so how could he have the heart to duel? Seeing this guy leave, Charlotte was also a little impressed and thought to herself, "This guy is flexible and is also a character. I have to be more careful next time." He went to a nearby coffee shop, ordered a cup of coffee, and waited patiently for Anne to get off work. Many materials in Strasbourg are on short supply, but this shortage is different. For example, he often cannot buy coffee on the Champs-Élysées, but the coffee shops in the Val d'Oise district, which is also in the upper 7th district, have sufficient supply. There is no way. This is the palace. the residences of ministers, the central government, and the 4 universities. On the Champs-Élysées, even a person like Charlotte will lack coffee. Sometimes she can't buy it and needs to find other ways to stock up. But in the Val d'Oise district, even a small clerk can have coffee freely. Outside the upper 7th district, even the food supply has begun to have problems. Charlotte actually rarely goes to the outer 15th district. This time when he came back, he has not returned to number 1, Falcon Street. His understanding of Strasbourg is still biased towards the good side. He waited for a short time and drank 2 cups of coffee. Just as he was about to order another snack, a beautiful figure walked into the coffee shop and asked for a cup of coffee. The other party found a place to sit down casually, and then saw Charlotte. The moment their eyes met, both of them showed surprise on their faces. Charlotte screamed, "Frederica, why are you back to Strasbourg again?" The leopard girl was also surprised and asked, "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be at the front?" Charlotte spread her hands and said, "I was investigated for tax issues, so I returned to Strasbourg." Frederica was surprised and said, "You still owe taxes? Impossible. Your weekly salary is not low, and all imperial civil servants have tax-free allowances, which are much lower than the tax rate of ordinary businessmen. You don't pay taxes." Charlotte knew that the leopard girl had misunderstood, and hurriedly explained, "It's not a matter of my personal tax payment." Frederica immediately thought of the fact that he often exempted taxes when he was in Silver Pigeon Castle, and said, Oh. Are you being investigated for tax exemption in Silver Pigeon Castle? It's not a big deal. You just need to pay the tax again." Charlotte felt that he couldn't explain it. He had given away too many places for free, and there was no way to collect additional taxes. First, he had pushed his reputation too high. And second, those who could pay taxes had been sent overseas by him, and there were not many people left in the local area. Charlotte didn't explain it. He knew that the leopard girl was not interested in it, so he asked, "Tell me, why are you in Strasbourg? The Empire's recent policy towards orcs is not very good." Chapter 330, The Bereaved Leopard. Frederica said helplessly, "Our orc tribe alliance collapsed, even the orc assassin alliance collapsed. The 7 leaders each took a group of people away. I didn't follow anyone and had to go back to Strasbourg. You know, I went to university here, and except for the southern part of the continent, I am most familiar with this place." Charlotte was shocked and almost blurted out, "Isn't that a leopard who has lost his home?" But his IQ and EQ were both online today, and he said, "Why not go back to the Knights of Favonius?" Frederica said without any hesitation or awkwardness, "Okay," but after agreeing, Frederica hesitated instead. Charlotte asked curiously, "Do you have any other questions?" Frederica turned the coffee cup and said, "Can I bring a group of people?" Charlotte replied, "No problem." Frederica's voice became a little lower and said, "The number of people is a bit too large." Charlotte asked curiously, "How many people are there?" Frederica didn't dare to look up, and said, "All the leopards, less than 5. Charlotte smiled brightly and asked, 50, 500, or 5,000? Frederica said, "A little more, less than 500,000. Charlotte was immediately shocked and asked, "Did you say all the leopard tribe?" He initially thought it was a small leopard tribe, with at most a few hundred people. But now he realized that it was not a small tribe, but the entire leopard tribe. There must be more than 500,000 people, right? Frederica didn't dare to look up, muttering to herself, "I don't want to take over such a hot potato." But all the elders of the leopard people died in the battle, and the stronger warriors were all taken away by demolition. Now the 186 leopard tribes with a population of nearly 500,000 are on my shoulders. I'm worried now. I need 5 cups of coffee every day to suppress my headache. The annoying thing is that, except for the Val d'Oise district, coffee is not available in other districts. I have to run out every day." Frederica didn't think Charlotte could solve the problem. She kept muttering to herself. It can be seen that the leopard girl is under great pressure. Charlotte hesitated for a long time and said, "I can take in these leopards, but there are 3 conditions." Frederica was surprised and said, "How can you take in so many leopards? How did you do it? Don't tell me you will sell them as slaves. I will get angry." Charlotte said lightly, "I now control almost 13 cities, and there are 2 cities in Ingrama. If we disperse these leopards and send them to various cities, we should be able to barely digest them." Frederica was very surprised and asked, "Are you so powerful now?" She did not doubt Charlotte's words. After all, they had worked together. The leopard girl had witnessed the first half of Charlotte's rise with her own eyes. Although it was a bit exaggerated for the other party to control 13 cities, it should not be particularly impossible. Frederica asked back, "What are the 3 conditions?" Charlotte held up a finger and said, "They must learn Farsi or Ingrima." Frederica nodded and said, "Okay, they want to live among humans, and this is a necessary skill. In fact, most orcs know a little Farsi, so don't underestimate the learning ability of orcs." Charlotte held up a second finger and said, "Every leopard must learn the Beast Scout transformation technique and master the ability to transform into humans. I know it is impossible for everyone to become a transcendent level 1, so as long as there are a little bit of results." Frederica was a little surprised and asked, "How do you know the Beast Scout transformation technique?" "This is the secret of the Orc Assassin League." Charlotte shrugged and said, "Can you tell me first if it's okay?" Frederica hesitated for a long time and said, "Although this condition is weird, I can try my best." Charlotte held up a third finger and said, "I can't control what happened in the past, but the orcs I taken must be non-cannibals." Frederica looked at Charlotte for a while and asked, "Did you know that humans occasionally eat orcs?" Charlotte replied, "My subordinates will fully implement the doctrine of non-cannibalism, and orcs cannot be eaten." Frederica was silent for a while and asked, "Have you seen Septimius?" Charlotte smiled brightly and said, "No. But I have seen Domitian." Frederica was furious when she heard about Domitian and shouted, "This guy is unworthy of being the leopard god, but he actually abandoned all the leopards and ran away. If I have the opportunity to enter the saint rank, I must teach him a lesson." Charlotte smiled and said, "You will see him soon." Frederica was surprised and said, "You are together? This word is a bit fierce." Charlotte hurriedly explained, "He went to Menelman." Frederica said, but was not surprised, and said lightly, "Domitian was originally Zimmerman's subordinate. It is not surprising that he goes to his fiancée now." Charlotte smiled and said, "Do you want to see him?" Frederica said, "No." Charlotte did not continue the topic and said, "Let's go to 58 Champs-Élysées in the evening and talk in detail. I have something personal to do now." Frederica put down her coffee and said, "Okay." Charlotte was a little curious and asked the last question, "You didn't bring all these leopards to Strasbourg?" Frederica said, "How is that possible?" Charlotte hurried to pick up and said, "Let's talk later." He paid for the coffee for the 2 people and left in a hurry. Frederica watched Charlotte leave and felt that the pressure on her body seemed to be a little less. When Charlotte saw Anne, the new law enforcement officer was processing documents, and was very happy to see Charlotte. She threw away the documents and ran out. The 2 left with laughter. Anne today established her prestige in the law enforcement department. Taking over the work was very smooth, and no one made things difficult for the newcomer. Alan's cook was waiting anxiously at the gate of Sheffield University. He didn't have a pass and couldn't enter the university. Suddenly, he was happy, ran over in a hurry, and shouted, "Sophia, I'm Alan's cook." Sophia Gallinold had a slight impression of him, but she didn't understand why this man suddenly came to the university to find her. She asked coldly, "What's the matter, sir?" Alan's cook whispered, "I was framed and forced to leave Strasbourg for the front. Before I leave, I want to expose a despicable villain to you. Charlotte Mecklin is actually secretly dating the Lady of Brittany. He must have deceived you and tried to play both sides." Sophia Gallinold's expression suddenly became very beautiful. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331. Even if I offend the Snake of Fate, it's just this. Alan's cook chattered on and on. Miss Brittany even admitted that Charlotte Mecklin has met the Earl. This person is working hard to gain personal connections and is mean at heart. Sophia Gallinold was no longer listening to his next few words. She suddenly felt a sense of urgency and thought to herself, has it reached the stage of meeting the parents? I have to work harder. Go visit Mr. Mecklin tonight. Excuse. She suddenly saw Alan's cook who was still trying to discredit Charlotte. She was ecstatic and cried out, "Isn't this a ready-made excuse?" Sophia Gallinold didn't remember this young man at all. She had asked her father to ask Duchess Misu for mercy, but she didn't expect to pay attention to a small figure like Alan's cook. Well, Sophia Gallinold is also the daughter of the Earl. Her father is the Minister of War of the Fars Empire. Power, prestige, and military power are all top in the Fars Empire. Sophia Gallinold remembered that Alan's cook had just said that he was going to the front, so she asked, "Which front are you going to?" Alan's cook said bitterly, "Philandon. Charlotte framed me because I investigated his tax issues, and he ordered someone to frame me and transferred me to Philandon." Sophia Gallinold said softly, "That's a good place to make a career. When you go to Philandon, you can go find my father, and I will write to him to recommend him to love you." Alan's cook was overjoyed and was about to say a few more words to Sophia, but Sophia Gallinold had lost her patience and hurriedly got on the carriage and headed straight for number 58, Champs-Élysées. In the carriage, Sophia actually wrote a letter to her father, Count Galanid. The main content of the letter is that I miss my father, but at the end, I mentioned that I have been troubled recently. A man named Alan's cook publicly insulted my reputation. I heard that he went to Philandon. It was just such a short sentence. Sophia passed by a branch of the imperial post office and asked a coachman to deliver the letter. She planned to write another letter in the evening and let the servants at home send it to the front line to ensure safety. Charlotte accompanied him for a while, looked at the scenery for a while, had some coffee, and spent the time until the evening. Anne said she wanted to go home, and Charlotte sent Anne back to number 58, Avenue 6, Val-de-Oise for the second time. Charlotte met Aunt Karen again. The aunt still silently took her young lady home and bowed to him and said goodbye. Charlotte was reluctant to leave, but she had no choice. The Count of Brittany was obviously not a father who could be easily fooled. He was still quite afraid of the strongest man in Fars. Charlotte returned to number 58, Champs-Élysées, and saw the two ladies. He was not surprised to see Frederica, but he was really surprised to see Sophia Gallinold. He asked, "Did you make an appointment?" Frederica knew Sophia Gallinold. After all, the latter was much more famous, but Sophia Gallinold did not know Frederica. The leopard girl had graduated for many years, and even at Gorgias University, few people knew the charm of the former forest goddess, not to mention that Sophia Gallinold was studying at the University of Sheffield. When Sophia Gallinold saw Frederica, the sense of urgency in her heart became even stronger. She smiled and said, "I have something else to do. Recently, someone has been slandering my reputation and yours. I am very troubled. But I have no good solution, so I came to ask Mr. Mecklen for advice." Sophia Gallinold is a 7th level Dark Moon warlock. In terms of extraordinary talent, only Ben Lamrock, Julian and a few others of the same age can compare with her. Usually, she looks like a leader in front of all her classmates. Even the older senior classmates are willing to be driven by her. But at this time, she looks hesitant and timid, shy and afraid. Any man who sees her will probably feel pity. Charlotte is also a serious man, and he knows that this lady has an extraordinary background. In particular, Sophia Gallinold's appearance and temperament always remind him of Catherine the Great, played by Marina Alexandrova. She has a full aura and is full of confidence. He really didn't expect that the other party would play some tricks. He asked casually, "Who is it?" Sophia Gallinold whispered, "Alan's cook." Charlotte was furious when she heard the name of her enemy. He really didn't know that poor Mr. Alan's cook had been exiled to the Philandon front by Anne. Anne didn't mention it at all, lest Charlotte would know about it. She would occasionally lose her temper. After all, the image of a lady was very important. He also didn't know that Mr. Alan's cook had been reported to his father, the Minister of War of the Fars Empire, by Miss Sophia Gallinold in a letter, and his future was doomed to be bleak. "I thought this guy turned hatred from love and killed Sophia Gallinold," I said bitterly. "This guy is insidious and cunning, with far-reaching schemes, and he can endure humiliation. He is really a difficult guy to deal with. I wanted to duel with him to end this matter completely, but I didn't expect that he would rather damage his reputation and refuse." Miss Sophia Gallinold, "Don't worry, I will handle this matter," Charlotte secretly said fiercely in her heart. Let the old goat do a big business later. Anne and Sophia still used political means. The two girls had different family educations, but they were almost all proficient in this skill. After all, they were not ordinary. Charlotte was simple and rough, without much technical content. Alan's cook did not expect that this rival would be so shameless and send out the holy order to assassinate him. Well, Alan's cook's fate. Even if he offended the snake of fate, it would be just like this. Sophia Gallinold was secretly delighted. To her, Alan's cook was just a simple tool, just an excuse for her to visit him. As for what happened to Alan's cook, Miss Gallinold didn't care. She whispered softly, I heard that his background is very powerful. He is the Duchess of Misu. Yes, they are not shallow. Sophia Gallinold really didn't know what kind of relationship Alan's cook had with the Duchess of Misu, so she could only be vague about it, but her attitude was also expressed. She was very worried about Charlotte. Charlotte didn't feel anything. He had lived 2 lives and had never met a girl with such a high rank. Well, in fact, Anne's rank was not low. Frederica, who had been silent all the time, felt that Miss Gallinold was probably conquering Charlotte, which made the leopard girl suddenly excited. Chapter 332 Mecklenite. Charlotte knew that she could not compete with Duchess Metsu, but she was not afraid of the Grand Duchess. Charlotte said calmly, "There is an old saying in the New World, a gentleman's revenge is never too late after 10 years. Although Duchess Metsu is powerful and has a large family, she may not be able to suppress Charlotte in 10 years. These words were spoken with great force, and Sophia Gallinold's pretty face flushed. Since she was saved by Charlotte, the various heroes she had imagined since childhood overlapped with Charlotte's image. This old saying from Earth, not to mention in this world, even on Earth, is a sonorous and penetrating aphorism. Sophia Gallinold said secretly in her heart, no wonder he can write such a good novel. It turns out that he is the protagonist in that kind of novel, possessing the best virtues, the most resolute character, the broadest chest. It's a pity that Anne of Brittany got there first. Why did she, a senior at Gorgias University, come to snatch our senior at Sheffield University? Is this intolerable? Well, this sentence is also from Mr. Mecklen's novel. It is so philosophical and so interesting, compared to Mr. Charlotte Mecklin, all the men in Strasbourg are like chickens and dogs. Well, these words. They are all from Charlotte's novels. His novels use unique words and precise descriptions. A new writing trend has emerged, known as the Mecklin School. Many new writers are imitating those works from Earth. Frederica couldn't help but said, "Charlotte, what level are you now?" Charlotte shrugged and said, "Yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I was just promoted to high level, 13th level, high level, low level, extraordinary." The leopard girl wanted to remind him not to pretend too much, but she was stunned by Charlotte's progress. She couldn't help but said, "When I assassinated you, you were just a low level. No, you seem to be only the 2nd level, or the 3rd level." Charlotte replied calmly, "Who hasn't made any progress?" Frederica couldn't help but shouted, "Less than a year." "Well, maybe more than a year, but that's still too scary. Don't you have any bottlenecks in your practice?" "Even if there is no bottleneck, the speed is too fast." "Have you faced the evil god directly?" No. The evil god is not that strong." "You must have looked directly at the 9 righteous gods." Charlotte smiled awkwardly and said, "Don't joke. Summoning evil gods is a crime that will result in death by burning." Frederica spread her hands and said, "There is no other possibility, which can perfectly explain everything." Charlotte was very upset and said, "I just hid my incompetence in college." Frederica said, "Hiding my incompetence in college? Aren't you sick?" Charlotte said, "You asked me to do something for you? Is this your attitude?" Frederica immediately stopped talking, but gave Sophia Gallinold a look, conveying the meaning of "I can help you." Sophia Gallinold was greatly surprised, and then she was ecstatic. It was surprising that Frederica was not a competitor but an ally. Frederica and Anne were not friends. She was a little more familiar with Dorothy, but Dorothy was a divine covenant holder and would never get married. So Frederica did not care who Charlotte dated. She was just under too much pressure recently and wanted to have some fun. If Charlotte could not withstand the temptation and her harem failed, it would have nothing to do with her. But if Charlotte stood the test, well, she could at least gain the friendship of Sophia Gallinold. In short, the leopard girl learned bad things from Dorothy. Charlotte was still thinking about how to deal with Alan's cook. He had wrongly overestimated the strength of this gentleman. But it was not Charlotte's fault. The first time he fought Alan's cook, although he was bare-handed, he could only slap him a few times, but could not break his protective fighting spirit. He might have overestimated him. The second time he invited Alan's cook to a duel, this guy actually held back. He would rather suffer damage to his reputation than to duel impulsively, which made Charlotte think of him more highly. This guy is not only in a key department like the law enforcement department, but he can also spread rumors and slander Sophia Gallinold, and he behaves easily, which is a bit like a midterm small boss. This guy Alan's cook's combat power is nothing. I have the blood rose in my hand, or I can use other weapons. I believe I can deal with this guy. It's just that he is too cunning. He was so arrogant at first, bringing 2 girls with him to provoke Annie and me, but he was able to hold back and act after careful planning. His personality is changeable and his mind is unpredictable. He is a capable opponent. Charlotte really didn't know that the reason why Aaron's cook changed so drastically during a lunch break was that he was so emotionally broken by his lovely Miss Anne de Bretagne. As for what he felt, this person dared to provoke Sophia Gallinold. He didn't even take the beloved daughter of the Minister of War into consideration. He was really bold. In fact, it was a very beautiful misunderstanding. Where did this guy get the courage to slander Sophia Gallinold? This lady's methods were very powerful. The Strasbourg Rose was one of the most powerful people in the entire old continent under the age of 20. Sophia Gallinold exchanged a few glances with Frederica, confirmed each other's purpose, and couldn't help asking, "Frederica, you are busy talking about my business. You must have something very important to come to Charlotte. I'd better not take up too much of Mr. Mecklen's time, otherwise it would delay your business." Frederica did not hide anything and told the story of the leopard tribe. She was not worried that Sophia Gallinold would leak the news, as the leopard tribe naturally had ways to protect themselves. Sophia Gallinold also found it difficult to deal with after hearing this. The Fars Empire had always had a bad impression of the orcs, and as the orcs besieged Strasbourg, everyone from top to bottom no longer had a good impression of the orcs. As soon as the war was over, the Fars Empire would definitely send troops to wipe out the orc tribes in the south of the continent. She whispered, "This is a very difficult matter," Charlotte said. "This is not that difficult. Orcs are also human beings. They are different from humans, but if they can be made the same, they can be integrated into humans. Millions of years ago, perhaps humans were just a group of monkeys." Sophia Gallinold and Frederica both thought he was joking, and Charlotte did not intend to explain. He was confident that he could handle these 2 things. However, after being back for so long, Charlotte had to fulfill her responsibilities as a host, and hurriedly asked Mrs. Nancy to prepare some desserts and tea. Chapter 333, Holy Light Kingdom. Being ordered to stay in Strasbourg, although he could date Anne every day, Charlotte was actually quite depressed. The worsening supply of materials, the gradually depressed atmosphere in society, and the patrol soldiers who arbitrarily checked pedestrians on the street were not very pleasant. If there was a choice, he would rather stay in South Seraph, or Behemoth, with his Knights of Favonius, because it would be more free to control a piece of territory alone. He didn't know how long the investigation on himself would last. While chatting with Frederica and Sophia Gallinold, Charlotte suddenly found a note on the table. He picked it up casually. There were 3 lines of words written on it. The first line of words was, "The golden ring was used to control the unfinished Holy Light God Kingdom." The second line of words was, "The Holy Light God Kingdom was created using the body and soul of another divine creature." The third line of words was, "Don't dream of controlling the Holy Light God Kingdom." Charlotte immediately understood that this was a note written to her by the golden goat Rolf. She didn't understand why the old goat told her this big secret. Charlotte crushed the note calmly and threw it into the trash can next to her. Charlotte is an earthling, and some living habits are difficult to change, such as not being used to littering, so he built dozens of trash cans and placed them everywhere at number 58 Élysée Avenue. Frederica did see the note, but she didn't see the content. She saw Sophia Gallinold's eyes flickering slightly, and knew that the other party must have seen something. She was about to ask later, when she heard Charlotte say, "Has anyone heard of the name of the Holy Light God?" Frederica didn't expect that Charlotte would tell this secret. In fact, Charlotte really didn't think that this matter could be considered a secret. The Holy Spirit Michaela was just that. He just felt that one person's plan is short, and many people's plan is long. There is no need to conceal such things, but it may miss the information that is within reach. Frederica shook her head. She really had never heard of the Holy Light Kingdom. Sophia Gallinold was slightly surprised and said, "Isn't this one of the 12 legendary warships? There are a total of 12 legendary warships on the 7 seas. These 12 legendary warships are all recorded in university textbooks." Charlotte has never heard of the Holy Light Kingdom, and her face showed a little suspicion. Sophia Gallinold smiled slightly and said, "There have been 3 major versions of the 12 legendary warships on the 7 seas. The Holy Light Kingdom is the first major version of the legendary warship. In the second version, 3 legendary warships were replaced. Without exception, they all disappeared." Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, "Why haven't I heard of this?" Sophia Gallinold whispered, Because the royal families of various countries have issued orders to ban these news, and major schools have also cooperated to delete and revise the publicly released textbooks, I know about this because I have related books hidden at home. If you are interested in the Kingdom of Holy Light God, Charlotte, I can get a few related books and you can return them at any time, Charlotte hurriedly said. Thank you, Sophia. He was indeed quite interested in the Kingdom of Holy Light God and wanted to know what this thing was all about. The old goat's mysterious words aroused his interest even more. Sophia Galinold agreed and said, I haven't flipped through those books much, but I have a general impression that the kingdom of Saint Michael somehow, overnight, has guardian creatures and an ancient magic worship. That ancient magic worship is the Kingdom of Holy Light God. Later, the ship disappeared, but the kingdom of Saint Michael gained an additional ship, the Queen Bee. Many relevant records believe that the kingdom of Saint Light God is the Queen Bee. It just changed its name. Some people also believe that they are two different ancient magic warships. I don't remember the specific information, I only remember that there was a saying that the kingdom of Saint Light God was very huge, more than 10 times larger than the Queen Bee. Charlotte had already eaten. The Queen Bee was already a giant ship. Even when he traveled to Earth, he rarely saw such a giant ship. The technology on Earth could not produce a ship that was 10 times bigger than the Queen Bee. If he did not have the note from the old goat, he would be more inclined to believe that the Kingdom of Holy Light God was the Queen Bee. However, with the note from the old goat and the fact that he did have 3 gold rings, the possibility of these being 2 ancient magic warships was greater. Charlotte pondered for a long time and could not figure it out. He suddenly wanted to go back to St. Michael Island to see the other divine creature and see if there was the Kingdom of Holy Light God on St. Michael Island. Anyway, a group of leopard people would be sent to Cappadocia and St. Michael Island in a while, so he might as well go there. Charlotte asked Sophia Galinold a few questions, but still could not get to the point. It was very late, and Sophia Galinold said goodbye and left. However, Frederica stayed at 58 Champs-Élysées Avenue because it was inconvenient for her to leave. Charlotte prepared a guest room for her. The next morning, the leopard girl left without saying goodbye. Charlotte did not see her when she got up, and did not think about it. She still had breakfast as usual, practiced at home for the whole morning, and went to N to have lunch at noon. In the afternoon, she stayed at 221B Baker Street in the Val d'Oise district. When N got off work, she took the initiative to come to 221B Baker Street. The two of them spent some time together. After Charlotte sent N home, she appeared on St. Michael's Island with the help of the mirror door. Today's St. Michael's Island is much more prosperous than when the Golden Goat fleet occupied it. Menelman's wrist is much stronger than the old goat. Although she didn't get the 3 gold rings and couldn't control the Holy Spirit Michael, with 3 magic alchemy warships and hundreds of ships, St. Michael Island is still an impregnable naval base. Charlotte didn't alarm anyone. She quietly used the infinite mirror world to shuttle around the island for a while and finally found the entrance to the underground maze. Although Menelman also found the underground maze, she just closed it up and didn't explore it. After all, she was too busy and didn't think it was necessary to explore this underground maze. So this underground maze was empty and there was no guard. Charlotte came here twice because the old goat moved down a mirror to trick him into appearing. Charlotte soon found the place where the golden goat Herolf tricked him last time, but found nothing. Charlotte turned around, and the power of the mazy master also played a role. He actually found the entrance to at least 3 levels below in one go. He went deeper and deeper. According to the coordinates, he was almost below sea level. Chapter 334 No one except the descendants of Michael may enter this gate. A blood flame lit up in Charlotte's palm, illuminating the road ahead. St. Michael's city was built by transforming the entire hill. Not only was there a 7-story city built in the hill, but also 7 layers of mazes were built inside St. Michael Mountain. Charlotte had searched 3 layers, and now he had found the entrance to the 4th maze, which was blocked by a black stone door. On the stone door, it was written in ancient words, "No one other than the descendants of Michael may enter this door." Of course, Charlotte was not a descendant of Michael, but he could not possibly obey this sentence. Charlotte exerted his strength and pushed slightly, and the door burst out with black flames, turning into 7 fire snakes that coiled up. Fortunately, Charlotte stopped quickly, otherwise he would have been burned. He raised his left hand with 3 gold rings, and the 7 fire snakes coiled for a while, and as expected, they gradually retracted into the stone door. He pushed the black stone door again, and it opened easily. Charlotte shrugged her shoulders and thought, it seems that there is no genetic verification in this world. As long as you have a token, you can pretend to be the descendant of Michael. Behind the black stone door is a huge hall. The hall is filled with coffins. Each coffin is placed alone on a stone platform. There is also something like a tombstone in front of it, which is full of words. These coffins are all built magnificently and even inlaid with jewels, just like works of art, but they still reveal a gloomy momentum, which makes people very uncomfortable. Charlotte is really not very courageous. Suddenly seeing such a coffin, she was frightened. She reached out and patted the stone door behind her, using the power of the Palace of Mirrors to create a magic mirror. The Gate of Mirrors and the Palace of Mirrors are essentially the same. Both can create magic mirrors. The former can return to the world in the mirror, and the latter can create more magic mirrors to create a small maze. The Gate of Mirrors is the ability to escape, while the Palace of Mirrors is a fighting skill. Charlotte first created a magic mirror to facilitate escape at any time. This place full of coffins made him a little scared. Charlotte walked to a coffin, identified it a little, and found that he could read the words on the stone tablet. It was probably an epitaph, describing the life of the person lying in the coffin. This coffin was the third-generation king of the kingdom of St. Michael. The achievements he boasted about in his life, in Charlotte's opinion, were just one sentence, living a peaceful life until death. He changed a coffin and read the words on the stone tablet in front of the coffin. In this coffin was a queen, and the words on the stone tablet praised her beauty. Well, her life was unremarkable. Charlotte walked around and silently compared the history of St. Michael Island. He went to the library several times to read materials when he returned to Strasbourg. The history of the kingdom of St. Michael was not a secret, nor was it submerged. He found that only the bodies of 3 kings were missing. One of them was the first king of the kingdom of St. Michael, the one who summoned divine creatures and turned himself into Holy Spirit. The last king of the kingdom of St. Michael was killed by someone who colluded with pirates. It is said that his body was set on fire and burned to ashes. It is reasonable that he is no longer alive, but there is another king of the kingdom of St. Michael whose body is missing. He is the 6th king. This king is quite mysterious. There is no record of him in all the information Charlotte found. However, he reigned for a long time, for more than 50 years. Charlotte did not try to open the coffin. Although he guessed that there might be a lot of financial reports and even extraordinary weapons inside, even the pirates of all generations did not take them away, or had already taken them away and just closed the coffin again. Of course, he chose to follow the crowd. After passing through countless coffins, Charlotte soon came to another hall. This hall was full of classics collected by the Kingdom of St. Michael, various historical books, documents, secret methods, and even some novels and poems. Charlotte saw this place that looked like a library, and she felt a little emotional, thinking, the kings of the Kingdom of St. Michael love to read books. He passed through countless bookshelves, and there was no way ahead. Charlotte felt something was wrong. This was only the 4th level of the maze. There should be at least 3 more levels. Moreover, on the black stone door, there were threatening words that said that only descendants of Michael could enter this door. There must be something in it. Although he failed to find a divine creature and did not see the Holy Light Kingdom, Charlotte was not discouraged. He pondered for a long time and planned to call the Golden Goat Rolf over. After all, the old goat had ruled here for a long time and should know almost all the secrets. Charlotte had not asked the old goat about the other divine creature because of his little awkwardness. After all, Charlotte had faced the evil god several times and even heard the whispers of the Serpent of Destiny. He was not very interested in the divine creature, and he always felt that seeing this thing would bring him bad luck. This time, the old goat left a note saying that there was another extraordinary battleship on St. Michael Island, so he came to take a look. Just as Charlotte was about to turn around and leave, the 3 golden rings on her hand lit up at the same time. Her eyes went dark, and she entered another space. The space here was very large, but unlike the 4 floors above, there was no flat ground, and no traces of excavation. It was just a natural cave. In the center of the cave, the Holy Spirit Michael floated. Charlotte hadn't looked at this divine creature carefully before. After all, as soon as this thing appeared, it was very imposing, and there was a huge sacred force field. Even several saints had difficulty moving freely. Charlotte didn't dare to get close at all. At this time, the appearance of this Holy Spirit was actually very handsome. He was like sleeping, with his eyes closed, motionless, and the sacred force field around him shrank and turned into a light cocoon, wrapping himself in it. Although he had the golden ring in his hand, Charlotte didn't want to alarm him, but he found out that the 5th level of the maze of St. Michael Island required the help of the golden ring to enter, and he was also slightly happy. This is the secret of exploration, which is much more interesting than forcing it out of the old goat's mouth. Charlotte looked at the Holy Spirit for a while, and was about to find the 6th level maze when he saw a pile of dry bones in the corner of the natural cave. He was curious and walked over to take a look. The bones must have been moved many times and had been torn into pieces. There was nothing valuable left. Charlotte guessed that it might be the first King Michael, who occupied the body of a divine creature and left his mortal body here. The golden goat Rolf must have been here, and there must have been other people who came in before and took away all the valuable things from the old king, leaving only worthless bones. Although the country where Charlotte lived in his previous life would definitely be burned to ashes after death, the concept of being buried in the ground was still deeply rooted in his mind. He pulled out a blood rose, dug a hole in the ground, and buried the pile of bones shallowly. Suddenly, Charlotte heard a faint laugh, and there was an indescribable joy in the laughter. Chapter 335, 12 Requests from Divine Creatures. Charlotte's soul was almost scared to death. It took him more than 10 seconds to realize that it was not the old king who was laughing. But it seemed even more terrifying, because this chuckle was very familiar. It was the voice of a young man. Charlotte was startled, and hurriedly prayed silently in her heart, "You who travel in the long river of time, know all mysteries, master extraordinary rituals, and rule the court of fate. Why are you alarmed? Did I do something to disturb you?" A voice sounded in Charlotte's ears. "Are you willing to sacrifice the Holy Spirit Michael to me?" Charlotte said without hesitation, "I do. How can I sacrifice him to you?" One of the 9 righteous gods, the Serpent of Destiny, asked for a sacrifice, which was a great thing. The righteous gods never take things from mortals for free. Even if they do, it is a good thing. As long as it can make the righteous gods not miss themselves, why would Charlotte be stingy with the Holy Spirit? The young man's voice came faintly. "Throw the ring that controls Michael to him." Charlotte immediately took off the golden ring and prayed silently, "You who travel in the long river of time, know all mysteries, master extraordinary rituals, and are the master of the court of fate. I follow your instructions, offer you a sacrifice that satisfies you, and look forward to your pleasure." He threw the golden ring to the Holy Spirit Michael with all his strength. The golden ring flashed and disappeared into Michael's body. Charlotte heard a melodious laugh, and a young man's voice said softly, "I once incarnated as a mortal, played in the world, and was friends with Michael for a while." The Holy Spirit Michael trembled all over, but his eyes never opened. Soon, a faint stream of light left his body and rushed into the mysterious and unpredictable long river of fate. After the faint stream of light left, the Holy Spirit calmed down again, but his body kept collapsed, and the sacred force field shrank again, and finally only a golden ring was left. Charlotte stretched out his hand and a flaming hand flew out, taking the golden ring back. He knew that this was the reward from the Serpent of Fate. What this righteous God needed was Michael, not the Holy Spirit. The body of this divine creature was unknown to what means the Serpent of Fate had used. No one could drive him anymore, and he was completely integrated into this golden ring. This golden ring was completely different from the original shape. It became a golden snake entangled. The golden snake was vivid and full of vitality, as if there was a mysterious and unpredictable fate lingering around. Charlotte put it on his hand carefully, and seemed to hear the whisper of fate in his ears. The feeling was sincere and wonderful. Charlotte waited patiently for a while, but did not get any hints and no sound rang in his ears. Then he began to explore the next level of the maze again. This time he quickly found the entrance. When Charlotte walked past a certain place, the ground lit up with the light of a magic circle. He stepped in and fell to the next level. Half of the 6th floor of the maze is seawater, or the underground lake in the cave. On the water surface is a huge warship. Its size is so huge that it is incredible. It is like a floating palace built in the sea. It is magnificent and luxurious. Charlotte was overjoyed, knowing that this must be the legendary Holy Light Kingdom. He raised the golden ring that controlled the legendary warship, but the Holy Light Kingdom did not move. Instead, another golden ring seemed to be blown by the wind, and whispered. These whispers were completely inaudible, but Charlotte jumped into the lake as if guided by her mind, and swam to the bottom of the Holy Light Kingdom. The bottom of this huge legendary warship used countless sharp nails to nail a huge woman who was no less than Saint Michael to the bottom of the ship. In other words, the Holy Light Kingdom was built with this divine creature as its keel. His facial features, limbs, and torso were all nailed tightly with huge nails, so that he couldn't even groan, but could only tremble slightly and groan in pain. He was still alive. Despite being tortured and nailed to the bottom of the ship, he was still alive, his soul was not shattered, and he was not dead. Although he knew that this thing was not a human, Charlotte was still shocked and couldn't help wanting to save him. The ring in the shape of a small golden snake suddenly sang a murmur, which made him alert. Charlotte soon discovered that he was completely different from the Holy Spirit Michael. The body of the Holy Spirit Michael was full of holiness and exuded a surging holy force field, but this divine creature had 6 huge wings of clear light and was wrapped in an indescribable force field. What surprised Charlotte the most was that each of the nails that nailed him down had a golden feather melted into it. It was obvious at a glance that these feathers must have been plucked from the Holy Spirit Michael. Charlotte was slightly surprised and thought, it turns out that he is not Michael's companion, but his enemy. They should have been fighting when the old king summoned them using some incredible means. One was made into a Holy Spirit, and the other was made into the Kingdom of Holy Light, but I can't understand why he is still alive. The Golden Goat Rolf didn't tell the truth. He can't occupy a body at all unless someone is willing to live in the form of a ship and endure such torture all the time. Charlotte reached out and gently touched the forehead of this divine creature. An array of thought came out: the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the giant whale king, the branches of the ancient madra tree, the evil power of the god of the labyrinth, the breath of the blood ancestor, the favor of one of the 9 righteous gods, the jealousy of the loved one, the fate of the divine creature, the blood of the peak holy rank, the grace of the red dragon emperor, the reward of the lionheart king, the indifference of serving the monarch. The person who collects all this. I will serve you as my master and am willing to carry you anywhere to explore all the treasures of the 7 seas. Charlotte was so scared that he quickly retracted his finger, but after a while, he couldn't help but touch the forehead of this divine creature again, and the thought came out again: the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the king of giant whales, the one who collects all of this. I will serve you as my master, and I am willing to carry you anywhere to explore all the treasures of the 7 seas. Next, this thought repeated these words over and over again, tirelessly, but there was nothing new. Charlotte thought carefully for a while and said, what if I can meet some of your requirements? He tried to pass on his consciousness, but did not get any feedback. Instead, the thought became stronger and stronger, shaking his mind endlessly, and he could hear it even if he retracted his finger. Chapter 336, The Log of the Holy Light Kingdom. Charlotte took out the diary without hesitation and slapped the forehead of this divine creature. The murmurs in her mind stopped abruptly, and then a piercing scream rang out: Agmiris! Agmiris! Karnstein! Agmiris! Karnstein! The voice repeatedly screamed the names of the 2 evil gods. Charlotte almost thought that this divine creature would summon the 2 evil gods, but fortunately, such a terrible thing did not happen. About half an hour later, the voice returned to its original appearance, and the thought came out again: the fangs of the sea serpent Vasuji, the tears of the giant whale king. The person who collected all of this. I will serve you as my master and am willing to carry you anywhere to explore all the treasures of the 7 seas. But after listening carefully, there was no evil power of the god of the labyrinth and the breath of the blood ancestor. Only 10 items were left. Charlotte retrieved the diary and found that it had an extra side. Every time he turned it over, sometimes it would be a Grimulus labyrinth, sometimes it would be Vampire Scroll, and sometimes it would be the Log of the Holy Light Kingdom. When he opened the Log of the Holy Light Kingdom, it recorded everything that happened to this legendary warship, from its construction, to its first voyage, to all the voyages on the 7 seas. The first few hundred pages of the Saint Light Kingdom log recorded how to build this legendary warship, and even how to ask for the help of the Serpent of Fate, thus severing an unimaginable friendship. Later, it was the places where the old king had traveled on it, how it became one of the 12 legendary warships on the 7 seas, how the Queen Bee was captured, and how it encountered the deep-sea monster Acris in the raging sea. Although it repelled this unimaginably huge sea monster, it also lost its most precious parts. When returning, it encountered the labyrinth evil god Agmiris in the Agar Sea, so that this legendary warship barely returned to St. Michael Island and could no longer sail, and no one could drive it again. Charlotte really didn't expect that this legendary warship had encountered so many adventures. He didn't understand why the old king would rather have this legendary warship and give up the unimaginable friendship. Charlotte could guess that this unimaginable friendship was 100% from the Serpent of Fate. Although the Holy Light Kingdom is extremely precious, and even more valuable than the Queen Bee, it is not worth giving up the friendship of one of the 9 great gods. I can only say, well, I am getting old and confused. Charlotte's diary has the function of Saint Light Kingdom navigation log. He can already slightly sense the situation of this legendary warship. It is indeed severely damaged, especially the divine creature. It looks fine on the surface, but in fact it was injured by the deep-sea monster Acris, and it is no longer enough to support the legendary warship's long voyage. Charlotte did not stay in the lake any longer, and swam back to the surface. His diary was blessed by the power of the 2 evil gods and recognized by a divine creature. The mere seawater could not wet it. He took it back into his arms and boarded this legendary warship for the first time. A powerful force swept over, but it did not hurt Charlotte at all. Charlotte knew that if he had not been reminded by the golden snake ring and had not dived into the lake and explored the bottom of the ship, he would have been blasted out by the defense field of the Holy Light Kingdom. Even if he held a golden ring that controlled this legendary warship, he would not be spared. Charlotte fumbled for a while, and the 3 golden rings on his left hand were secretly thankful. After boarding the Holy Light Kingdom, the golden rings on Charlotte's hands began to exert their power, allowing him to travel unimpeded on this legendary warship. Charlotte soon found a magic circle at the bow. It was obvious that the entrance to the 7th level maze was on this Holy Light Kingdom. The golden snake ring on Charlotte's hand kept murmuring, reminding him to stay away. The closer he got to the magic circle at the bow, the more anxious the murmur became. He hesitated for a while, turned around and left, and did not continue to explore the 7th level maze. For him, being able to explore here was enough. Charlotte returned to St. Michael's City layer by layer. He did not go to see anyone. Through the infinite mirror world, he returned to Strasbourg again, number 58, Champs-Élysées. Charlotte knew that he might meet most of the needs of the Holy Light Kingdom. Although there were still a few things missing, he could also go to find them, but he still wanted to plan before taking action on things related to God. He first looked for information and asked the Golden Goat Rolf to avoid any mistakes due to negligence. When Mrs. Nancy saw him, she mentioned Frederica and Miss Sophia Gallinold. They visited one after another in the evening. When they learned that he was not there, they returned disappointed and agreed to come again tomorrow morning. Charlotte said she knew and asked Mrs. Wu Muzijiang to help prepare dinner. He had been busy on St. Michael's Island for a long time and had not eaten anything yet. When dinner was served, Charlotte carefully looked at the newly transformed golden snake ring. He had roughly understood what this thing was. It could whisper to remind himself to make the most favorable choice and avoid danger. After leaving St. Michael's Island, it stopped making any noise. Obviously, in Strasbourg, Charlotte was safe and stable, and would not encounter anything particularly good or particularly bad. After dinner, Charlotte returned to his room and practiced for a while as usual. This time, he felt that his practice was progressing rapidly. The whisper of the snake of fate was indeed far better than looking directly at the 2 evil gods, and it was quite safe. However, if there was a choice, Charlotte would rather work harder and spend more time practicing than encounter any god again. The next day, early in the morning, before Charlotte got up, she heard Mrs. Nancy ringing the copper bell downstairs to remind him that there was a visitor. Charlotte got up, washed her face, changed her clothes, and hurried downstairs. As expected, she saw Frederica and Sophia Gallinold. The 2 ladies seemed to be good friends and were very affectionate. When Frederica saw Charlotte, she asked, "I'm going to send the first group of leopard people over. How are you going to arrange it?" Charlotte was surprised and asked, "Why are you in such a hurry?" Frederica said with a somewhat ugly face, "The leopard tribe has run out of food. If no one helps, a great famine will occur immediately. I don't have time to delay. I hope you can arrange them as soon as possible, Charlotte, or go to a city or go to sea. No matter what, more leopard people can survive." Charlotte thought for a while and said, "No need to come to Strasbourg, just let them go to Machupi." Chapter 337 Mechlin Manor. Charlotte plans to transport all of these orcs to Cappadocia. The island of Galling, where Cappadocia is located, is vast, but the population is too small. There are many undeveloped places, which are enough to accommodate these leopard people. Charlotte hopes to bridge the difference between humans and orcs through these leopard people. He lets humans practice the Beast Gout transformation technique, and also lets leopard people practice the Beast Gout transformation technique. If both sides can practice this technique successfully, how can they tell who is human and who is orc? Charlotte hopes to create a new nation from this, regardless of behemoths, South Sierra, leopards, or other races and nations that can be integrated in the future, but he doesn't know what it will look like in the end. Charlotte knows that in this world, beautiful ideas often do not necessarily lead to beautiful results, but he feels that he is not an omnipotent god, so he should try to do more. Frederica knew about Machupi and had been to Machupi. She also knew where Dorothy often worked. Charlotte's arrangement was very considerate of her. She was immediately overjoyed and said, "I feel relieved with your words. I will notify them to go to Machupi." Sophia Galan had waited quietly for Frederica to finish her work, then pointed to a pile of books and said, "This is all the information I found about the Kingdom of Holy Light. If you still need it, Mr. Mecklin, I will continue to help." Charlotte smiled slightly and said, "This is not easy. I actually have something else I want to ask you too." Charlotte pondered for a moment and said, "I borrowed a batch of books, but due to time constraints, I can't read them all. Moreover, these books are very precious. I wonder if you two have time to help me find some valuable information." When Charlotte saw the books Sophia Galinold brought, she immediately thought of the library in the underground maze she had seen on St. Michael's Island. She didn't know what was in those books, but she couldn't finish reading them in a short time by her own strength. However, these books were very precious, and there were many inherited secrets in them. She definitely couldn't just find a bunch of quick documents to read them, so she wanted to ask the two ladies for help. Frederica looked embarrassed. Of course she could read books. After all, Miss Leopard also graduated from college, but she really didn't like reading. Sophia Galinold was excited and said, "I can help." Frederica had no choice but to answer, "I can help too." Charlotte then remembered that she also had a manor, which was also given by the Queen, but he hadn't been there for a long time, or simply put, he had never been there. Although 58 Champs-Élysées is not small, it obviously cannot hold so many books. 221B Baker Street in Val d'Oise is even smaller, and only the manor that he had never been to was suitable for transporting the batch of books back to St. Michael's Island. He first asked Mrs. Nancy to go to the central government office to inform Anne that he could not have lunch with her today, and then took Frederica and Sophia Galanid, took the dark luxury, and went straight to the manor outside the city. The original name of this manor has been cancelled by Anne, and changed to a new name, Mecklin Manor. This manor mainly grows fruits, half of which are supplied to Strasbourg and the other half are used for winemaking. Several fruit wines produced by the manor have good sales in Strasbourg and are supplied to several restaurants, mainly targeting middle-class consumption. In addition to planting and winemaking, Mecklin Manor also has a fairly large house, a 5-story house with nearly 100 rooms. On weekdays, there are 50 or 60 farmers and more than 20 servants working in Mecklin Manor. Anne took over here and equipped the manor with 5 knights, taking up some of Charlotte's knight quota. These 5 knights are all from the knights of the Brittany family. Although they are old or injured and can't go to the battlefield, they are strong and experienced. It is enough to protect a private manor in the area. The last time the orcs surrounded it, Mecklin Manor was not hit by the war because of its remote location. Occasionally, a few orc soldiers came over, but they were all driven away by the knights, farmers and servants who were guarding the manor. Charlotte brought 2 ladies to Mecklin Manor. After a brief inspection of the house, he began to move books. Frederica and Sophia Galinold helped to classify them and check whether there were any records related to the name of the Holy Light God. This kind of search is not reading, but it can be done quite quickly. For example, just by looking at the category of a book, you can roughly determine whether it is related to the information you want to search. For some books, you can determine the scope of the content by just flipping through the catalog. The 3 of them were busy all day. Charlotte calculated the time and found that it was almost time for Anne to get off work. He couldn't accompany Anne at noon, and he couldn't miss her after get off work. He made an excuse and asked the 2 ladies to continue searching. He used the infinite mirror world to go back to Strasbourg first. Before leaving, he didn't forget to pick out a mirror spirit and leave a coordinate for himself at Mecklin Manor. Anne was quite disappointed to learn that Charlotte couldn't come at noon. When she got off work, she saw Charlotte rushing over and was overjoyed. She said, "Have you finished your work?" Charlotte smiled and said, "It's not a big deal. Aren't you running a bookstore and publishing business? I just bought a batch of books. You can pick out which ones are more valuable and choose to publish some of them, so that your publishing house won't have enough books to print and the bookstore won't have enough books to sell, and was very happy. Although she didn't care about these, and her publishing house and bookstore mainly sold Anne Macklin's novels, Charlotte's thoughts still made Miss Anne Bretton very happy. She and Charlotte hurriedly left the central government office. Charlotte was about to ask where to stay for a while, and whispered, "Today is my aunt's birthday. I want to visit her. Can you accompany me?" Charlotte was about to ask which aunt, but then her face became awkward because Anne added, "Aunt Sophie." Charlotte's face was stiff, but she tried to force a smile and said, "We should go and see. I will definitely accompany you. It's a pity that your aunt, Miss Sophie, will never see you and me together again." Anne was also a little sad and said, "If it wasn't a misunderstanding, I wouldn't have known Mr. Mecklin. If I hadn't known Mr. Mecklin, I can't imagine how I would live in the future." In addition to wanting to express my grief, I also want to thank Aunt Sophie for touching fate for us and giving us the opportunity to know each other, Charlotte said decisively. We should thank Aunt Sophie. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338, The Favored One of the Serpent of Fate. The temples of the 9 gods also run cemeteries, which is the main business of the gods. What surprised Charlotte was that the cemetery of the Breton family was in the Temple of the Serpent of Fate. This temple was in the Lucavero district and had a very long history. It was built during the Sherlock dynasty and has existed for 6 years so far. Charlotte, as the chief of the patrol army in the Lucavero district and the director of the Political Affairs Bureau, has not been back for a long time. Since the patrol army was transformed into night order, not to mention Charlotte, even the patrol army has been empty all year round, which is similar to the situation when they were idle. Now the biggest force in the Lucavero district is the Bader Chamber of Commerce. The Bader Chamber of Commerce is not a gang organization in the conventional sense. It is a union of 17 shops, forming a security group with gang colors. It rarely conflicts with other gangs and only protects the business safety of 17 shops. Ross Bader, the leader of the Chamber of Commerce, made 2 mistakes, but soon realized them and chose to join Charlotte and settle in Machupi, doing his best to help him develop business. Charlotte has too many soldiers, and they don't need so many people to fight. Now Machupi is well staffed, and the Bad Chamber of Commerce has recruited many employees. The scale has expanded more than 10 times, and there are far more than 17 shops. Not counting the newly built shops in Machupi, there are more than 50 shops in the Lucavero district alone. Well, 2 of them are Anne's bookstores. Most of the gangs in the Lucavero district were fooled by Charlotte to join the Knights of Favonius, and the power declined greatly. This is Charlotte's territory, so the expansion of the Bad Chamber of Commerce in the Lucavero district has almost no resistance. Charlotte returned to the Lucavero district. As soon as she showed up, someone rushed to inform the person in charge of the Bad Chamber of Commerce that Ross Bad was now out and not in Strasbourg. The person in charge now is his son, Little Bad. Little Bard was also over 30 years old. He immediately led a group of people and waited for Charlotte halfway. He approached Dark Luxury with a smile on his face and said, "Mr. Mecklin, you are finally back to the loyal Lucavero district. If you have any instructions, please feel free to call us. We are all proud to serve you." Charlotte took a look at the people outside. It was the first time for him to be received so grandly, but he really didn't like these ceremonies. He said, "You should take care of your own business. I don't need these. I remember you are Bard's son, right? Work hard, and our West Wind will get better and better." Little Bard smiled slightly and saluted Anne respectfully. The relationship between Charlotte and Miss Anne Bretton was well known in the Knights of Westwind. After all, this lady was the West Wind goddess of Gorgias University, and their knights were called the Knights of Westwind. Is there any need to explain this relationship? When Little Bud heard that Anne wanted to get involved in the bookstore business, he personally visited Anne and gave Anne 2 shops. Although Anne still paid, at least this loyalty impressed Anne very much. Little Bud was busy running around for the operation of these 2 bookstores, and he cared more about it than his own business. Even Charlotte herself didn't know that there was already a network of relationships around him, although it was still too weak, but it was quite flexible. Little Bud knew Charlotte's temper, but he was traveling with Anne, and it was obviously not appropriate to continue to follow, so after the visit, he took people away, leaving only more than a dozen teenagers to listen to Charlotte's orders. Charlotte didn't care at first, but occasionally he looked out of the car and saw more than a dozen teenagers following the carriage, rushing all the way. His eyes tightened slightly, and he actually saw an acquaintance. Well, in fact, there was more than one acquaintance, but the rest were not too familiar. He saw Yang Milian from Seagull City. The teenagers who followed him were also from Seagull City. Before Charlotte left her hometown, she often saw them on the street. Charlotte thought to herself, why are they in Strasbourg? He did not show up to greet them, and planned to find a chance to ask later. Dark Luxury soon arrived at the Temple of the Serpent of Fate. Charlotte accompanied Anne out of the carriage and casually took the Dark Luxury as a ring. The teenagers following behind all showed envy. One of them whispered, when will we be able to own such a magical treasure? Yang Milian whispered, don't dream, he has been in Strasbourg for a while. After being tempered by society, he has become more alert, but also more able to recognize reality. Yang Milian didn't feel anything in Seagull City, but when he arrived in Strasbourg, he quickly found a way to make a living because he had a group of teenagers under him. He ran errands for the people in the city. Although life was very hard, at least he didn't starve. He soon found out that Charlotte was working in the Lucavero district, so he brought people here, thinking that he would be able to see Charlotte soon. However, he did not expect that Charlotte almost never showed up, but there were traces of Charlotte everywhere in the Lucavero district. The patrol army belonged to Charlotte Mecklen, the government bureau belonged to Charlotte Mecklen, many of the goods on the street belonged to Charlotte Mecklen, and even the newly opened bookstores were said to belong to Charlotte Mecklen. The residents of the Lucavero district, even when buying things, would assume that they were of high quality and low price when they heard that it was the property of the Knights of Favonius, and they would feel more assured when buying. Yang Milian gradually lost the idea of looking for Charlotte. He felt that he and Charlotte were no longer from the same world. He could also understand why Charlotte did not go to see him at the beginning. Well, she misunderstood. This was Charlotte's first time to visit the Temple of the Serpent of Fate. Although it was the Black Moon era and Lady Black Moon was in charge of everything, the faith and worship of the other 8 gods had never been affected. The Temple of the Serpent of Fate still had many believers. Charlotte and Anne walked quietly through several buildings and arrived at the cemetery behind the temple. There were also many people mourning their loved ones here, and everyone was very quiet. And found Sophie Breton Cemetery. Because she was killed by her husband, she was not buried in the Young Mills family cemetery after her death, but in the Brittany family cemetery. Anne placed a bunch of white daisies she brought with her in front of her aunt's tombstone, crossed her fingers, held them between her brows, and prayed silently. Charlotte felt deeply ashamed and prayed silently for a few sentences, saying, Ms. Sophie, everything is the fault of the former Charlotte Mecklen. I am Wang Haishen, and I am no longer that person. If you have returned to the embrace of the 9 gods, please don't think about me anymore. I have also killed your enemies for you. Yang Mills did tie Charlotte's hands. Just as Charlotte finished praying and looked around, a young priest came and said with a smile, the patron of the Serpent of Fate. The High Priest wants to see you. Chapter 339, Whisper of Fate. Charlotte was startled and asked, Respected priest, did you recognize the wrong person? The young priest smiled and said, The person who holds the Whisper of Fate is tied to the Snake of Fate. How could I recognize the wrong person? Besides, even if I am wrong, the High Priest will not recognize the wrong person. Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, Whisper of Fate. The young priest nodded and said, It is the golden snake ring you hold. Charlotte knew that the ring that was changed by the Snake of Fate was named Whisper of Fate. Anne had opened her eyes. She was also very curious and said, Let's go see the High Priest. Charlotte agreed, took Anne's hand, followed the young priest, and soon arrived at a secluded place. There were no buildings here, only a forest. A tall old priest stood there. He was like a giant tree, towering into the clouds. Charlotte felt a little bit of intimacy, performed an imperial salute, and asked, The High Priest asked me to come here. Do you have any instructions? The High Priest smiled slightly, and first said to Anne, When you were a child, you often came here with the Count. I didn't expect that you have grown up so much. Anne did come here often with her father when she was a child, but the Count of Brittany was getting busier and busier, so he seldom accompanied his daughter here. Anne also hurriedly performed a daily greeting and said, This is the High Priest of Tromsø, who is also a good friend of my father. This is Charlotte Mecklin." The High Priest of Tromsø smiled slightly and said, "No need to introduce Mr. Mecklin. He holds the Whisper of Fate and is a favored person of the Serpent of Fate. I asked Mr. Mecklin to come here because I hope you can join the temple. The favored people are different from the covenanted people. They don't need to abide by those rules, nor do they need to work in the temple. They enjoy all freedom." Charlotte was slightly surprised and asked, "Can I still join the temple?" "Generally speaking, only the covenanted people can become clergy. Of course, the covenanted people can also not become clergy, but the reverse is not true. Non-covenanted people cannot join the temple. Of course, the covenanted people of other gods cannot join the temple they have never believed in." The High Priest of Tromsø whispered, "Of course, the gods are always particularly gracious to those they like," and was also quite surprised, and she asked, "What is the Whisper of Fate?" Charlotte usually did not wear small pieces on her hands. He took out a golden snake ring from his arms and asked curiously, "I haven't shown it to anyone. How did you know that I have it?" The High Priest of Tromsø pointed, and a clear light rose from Charlotte's body, which disappeared as soon as it was emitted. He said, "In the eyes of the gods' loyal servants, the light of fate on those favored by the gods is as clear as a torch in the dark night." And, the High Priest of Tromsø smiled slightly, and said, "I can glimpse fate a little." Charlotte suddenly realized, and said, "You can tell fortunes." The High Priest of Tromsø smiled and said, "Although you can't calculate fate, it's okay to understand it this way. There are very few extraordinary people who follow the prophecy system in this world. Charlotte has only met one, and he killed him casually. Even as a priest of the Serpent of Fate, not everyone can touch fate. The High Priest of Tromsø is obviously different." He said to the young priest, "Give the priest's documents, robes, and the revelation of the Serpent of Fate to Mr. Mecklin." The young priest had already prepared for this. He handed Charlotte a document, a priest's robe, and a thick manuscript. The High Priest of Tromsø said, "From today on, you are the official priest of the Temple of the Serpent of Fate. No matter where you go in the old and new continents, as long as there is a Temple of the Serpent of Fate, you can get help. Where there is no Temple of the Serpent of Fate, you have the power and the responsibility to build a new temple to welcome the glory of the Serpent of Fate." Charlotte took these things as if in a dream. When he saw the thick manuscript, he couldn't help muttering, "Is this a revelation from God? Why is it so thick? Is the Serpent of Fate so long-winded?" He immediately killed this disrespectful thought. In the Temple of the Serpent of Fate, in front of the High Priest, he secretly criticized one of the 9 righteous gods, who was also the one who could read people's hearts the most. He simply didn't want to live. The High Priest of Tromsø smiled and said, "You have another privilege. You can come to the temple to learn the art of fate. Although the extraordinary path you're on has nothing to do with fate, it will be very easy for you to learn the art of fate under the blessing of the Serpent of Fate." Charlotte nodded. Whether to learn the art of fate or not can be discussed later. He chatted with the High Priest of Tromsø for a few words, and confirmed that the High Priest had nothing else to do, and then left the temple with Anne. Charlotte did not look at Yang Milian for a long time, and got on the carriage with Anne. In the carriage, Charlotte handed the documents and robes to Anne and said, "Please put them away from me." Anne was overjoyed and said, "I will put these things away." Charlotte kept all the documents of her duties by herself. This was the first document she gave to Anne, and it was of great significance to Anne. Charlotte felt that these things were in the way, so she handed the documents and robes to Anne and opened the divine revelation. After only one glance, his face changed drastically, and he whispered in shock, "Is he so perverted?" As soon as he said this, he knew he had said something wrong, and hurriedly covered his mouth, but the expression on his face was still horrified. Anne asked curiously, "What's wrong with this divine revelation?" Charlotte handed over the thick manuscript in her hand. Anne took a look and couldn't help but exclaim, but her pretty face was slightly excited, and whispered, "Charlotte, this is a good material for a new novel. Don't you really want to start a new book?" Charlotte's face changed drastically, and he hurriedly said, "As an author, it is my greatest duty to write every novel to the end and wholeheartedly dedicate a complete and good story to readers. I still have several novels that have not been completed. How can I start a new book? This is irresponsible to the readers." Charlotte took back the thick divine revelation. He was now very sure that the Serpent of Destiny was a serious god of fun, and gave her divine revelation purely to have more fun. This divine revelation has a total of 128 items, with both decimal and integer items, and there is absolutely no suspicion of making up a large number. The righteous God instructs believers on how to please themselves. This righteous God is really serious. Chapter 340, The God of Fun. 1. Invent a custom related to the snake of fate, and let it be passed down, so as to provide a stable number of believers for the snake of fate. Reward: 1 Joy of Fate. 2. Kill several important believers of the evil god, such as Morgan Eleding, who lives in Picardy. He believes in the god of joy, such as Wang Neil in Gowron, who also believes in the god of joy, and Tyran, Marty, Ozens, Lux, and Mason, who live in Rose, and Marvin Sato, who also believe in the god of joy. This is an evil god who steals the joy of the world and makes people unhappy. Make the god of joy unhappy. Depending on the degree of unhappiness of the god of joy, reward 1 to 3 joys of fate. 3. Secretly draw a few patterns of the snake of fate in the hidden corners of the gate of glory, and don't let anyone notice. The longer the pattern lasts, the more destiny joy you will receive. If it lasts for more than 1 year, you will be rewarded with 1 destiny joy. If it lasts for more than 3 years, you will be rewarded with 1 more destiny joy. If it lasts for more than 5 years, I advise you to raise it in advance. 3 years is the limit of his tolerance. When the Lord of Glory was furious, I was also a little scared. 4. Find a high priest of the Lord of Glory and give him a hard kick in the butt or crotch. The higher the status of the high priest of the Lord of Glory, the deeper the cultivation, the harder the kick, and the more destiny joy you will be rewarded. There is no reward below the high level. Kick the high priest to urinate and reward 1 destiny joy. Kick the holy priest to howl and reward 3 destiny joy. 5. Write a novel about Black Moon. You can control the scale yourself. Try to make her show her love for me without angering Black Moon. If something goes wrong, don't say it was my instigation. But don't worry, Black Moon has a bad temper. When he takes action, he probably won't give you a chance to quibble. If the novel sells more than 10,000 copies, 1 joy of destiny will be awarded. If it sells more than 30,000 copies, 1 more joy of destiny will be awarded. If it sells more than 100,000 copies, the 3rd joy of destiny will be awarded. For every 100,000 copies sold, 1 joy of destiny will be awarded. There is no upper limit. 6. Charlotte's heart trembled when he saw this thick revelation from God. Many of the revelations from God were just encouraging him to commit suicide, to commit a great suicide. The more he committed suicide, the happier the serpent of destiny would be. Moreover, this god of fun did not intend to bear the consequences at all. When it came to kicking the butt or crotch of the high priest of the Lord of Glory, Charlotte immediately thought of the high priest Augusredin. However, this high priest was a genuine saint, with the power of glory protecting him. How could a mere high-level extraordinary person kick him and make him scream? Even if he did, how would he survive? The high priest Augusredin was not a saint who would not get angry. He was just a saint. Even for the sake of Jin Iju, Grand Priest Augusredin could not allow him to be so presumptuous. As for playing tricks on the serpent of fate, this is even more suicidal than the 128 divine revelations. Charlotte sighed, put away the thick revelations, and said, "These tasks are not easy to do," and whispered, "Actually, the first one is easy. We can publish a special edition of novels about the serpent of fate. Add a brand new character to each novel, and let him always mention a custom about the serpent of fate in the novel. When this set of novels spreads, maybe a brand new custom can be created." Charlotte immediately felt that Anne's words made sense. The special edition of the novel about the serpent of fate could please this righteous god just by listening to it. He could also add Lady Black Moon to it and let the 2 righteous gods have an ambiguous relationship. Well, how can it be ambiguous again? And not anger Lady Black Moon? He pondered for a while, but still couldn't think of a solution, so he said a few words to Anne. Anne smiled and said, "Leave it to me, I have a solution." Charlotte was overjoyed and said, "Anne, you are really smart and beautiful. What is the solution?" Anne smiled playfully and said, "Write the 2 gods as the same sex." Charlotte was shocked, but after a while, she thought the solution was feasible. He really didn't know that a certain gunman lady was doing a big job again, and was already an old driver who was familiar with doing this kind of thing. The 2 went back to 221B Baker Street in Val d'Oise and stayed for a while. Charlotte sent Anne back to 58 6th Avenue, then bought 3 meals and returned to Mechlin Manor with the help of the infinite mirror. He said seriously, "Frederica, Sophia, I brought you delicious food." The 2 ladies were dizzy from flipping through the books, and they didn't know that Charlotte had time to go on a date. Seeing that Charlotte had brought food, they all secretly praised his attentiveness. Well, the attentiveness of a scumbag. Charlotte accompanied the two ladies to dinner, and then sent them back. She invited them to come again tomorrow, and instructed the servants of Mecklen Manor that no matter when, as long as the two ladies came, they must be welcomed with the greatest courtesy, regardless of whether she was there or not, and there was no need to notify. Frederica always felt that something was wrong. Sophia Galan clenched her fists, feeling that she had taken a solid step forward. She could enter and leave Mecklen Manor freely, which was a great trust. The next day, Charlotte learned about a big event from the newspaper. The joint fleet of Fars and Ingrima encountered the fleet of Byron in the giant Whale Sea, and the largest naval battle in history took place. Both sides deployed more than 20 magic alchemy warships, more than 700 ordinary warships, and more than 200,000 troops. It was a battle. Ingrima lost nearly 100 warships and 2 magic alchemy warships. Fars suffered even greater losses, with more than 100 ordinary warships sunk and 5 magic alchemy warships permanently sunk to the bottom of the sea. In comparison, Byron was much better, losing less than 150 warships and sinking 4 magic alchemy warships. Menelman's fleet was not part of the official Royal Navy sequence, so it was not summoned to participate in the war. Duchess Misa's Northern Fleet, which was carrying out a feint attack mission in this battle, had the main combat goal of blocking several major military ports in Byron, and luckily escaped. However, Menelman learned of the news of the naval battle and hurried to the battlefield. Just as 2 magic alchemy warships of Byron were withdrawn from the battle, he was hit by the first rows of Fars. With his powerful strength, after losing 6 or 7 ordinary warships, he captured the 2 magic alchemy warships of Byron. The loss of Byron's magic alchemy warships suddenly soared to 6, which was almost equal to the losses of the combined navy of Ingrima and Fars. With the addition of these 2 Byron's magic alchemy warships, Menelman was invincible on the battlefield, and the Imperial Rose Fleet was invincible in the Great Whale Sea. Even Duchess Misa had to say after the war, when the rose of the Sumai family bloomed, even I was eclipsed. Chapter 341, Rose's Expedition. Charlotte was shocked when she just read the news in the newspaper. The imperial officials, nobles, and even the emperor who got the news from the war report were more than 10 times more shocked. The loss of the Fars Royal Navy made every class from top to bottom feel extremely distressed. Fars had accumulated these assets for hundreds of years, and it was not a one-day effort. At the same time, the empire completed all the procedures at an unprecedented speed. After receiving the war report, within 4 hours, a document was sent from Strasbourg to the Imperial Rose Fleet. Menelman was promoted from the 17th class Imperial Captain to the 13th class Imperial Colonel, and his political status was as many as 22 items. It was the kind of novel that would be criticized by readers for being too wordy. The Fars Empire's favor to Menelman increased countless times in an instant. Although Charlotte had made numerous contributions, they were mainly in remote battlefields. South Seraph was not the main area where the Empire deployed its troops. The 2 Brittany offensives were nominally led by other commanders. Secondly, his contributions were indeed not as great as Menelman's. Thirdly, he truly felt the indifference of serving the monarch. Charlotte was having breakfast when Sophia Galinold came to visit. Frederica did not come. She asked Sophia Galinold to bring a message, saying that she would go to Machupi today to settle the first group of leopards. Charlotte invited the Strasbourg Rose to have breakfast together. Sophia did not refuse, but she ate very politely, only eating half a piece of bread and drinking a cup of coffee. During breakfast, Charlotte casually mentioned the Battle of the Sea. Sophia Galinold looked a little solemn and whispered, "I came here today to tell Mr. Mecklen something. I am also a subject of Fars. At this time when the country is in danger, I can't indulge in personal," she said in an inaudible voice, "emotions." Then she said a little louder, "I have applied for a leave of absence and will go to the army soon. I can't accompany you anymore." Sophia Galinold felt heartbroken for a while. She never believed that she would lose to Anne of Brittany as long as she competed fairly. But as the daughter of the Galinold family, she could not hide behind an indulgent personal love when the empire needed her. Even if she was reluctant, she was going to give up this relationship and serve the country. Sophia Galinold didn't know if she could come back. She was full of tenderness and had an inexplicable resentment towards Anne. She looked at Charlotte, hoping to see her one more time, because she didn't know if she could come back alive from the battlefield. Fate was cruel and ruthless, and the battlefield was as cold as iron. Even with the noblest birth, the most remarkable surname, and the high rank, even the extraordinary saints could not guarantee that they would come back alive. Sophia Galinold didn't expect that the first time she liked a boy, she would face a disastrous defeat and had to retreat before she had used all her strength to fight for him. Although Sophia had countless ways to stay in Strasbourg, she was unwilling to disgrace the surname Galinold. She even felt that she would look down on herself if she stayed in the capital of the empire for love instead of going out to fight for the country. Charlotte was speechless, so she whispered, "I wish you good luck in military affairs, Sophia." "Which battlefield are you going to?" Sophia Galinold replied, "I will join the navy." At this moment, Charlotte even thought about whether to give the whale slaughter and the whale killer to Sophia Galinold. These two knight lances are of great help in fighting on the sea. But when he thought of Anne happily hanging these two knight lances on the wall of 221B Baker Street, next to his magic oil painting, he knew that this was a big deal that could please the snake of fate. After hesitating for a long time, he sighed and decided to change to a smaller suicide. He took out a gold ring, handed it to Sophia Galinold, and said, "I have a friend who has a great warship, but she probably won't go to the battlefield. Please have someone send this gold ring to 699 South Riverside Street in Cervantes. Yes, please ask someone to send it there. Don't go there in person, and ask her if you can borrow the ship. As a friend, I'm sorry, very sorry, that I can't give you more help when you go to the battlefield. Please don't refuse it." Sophia Galinold took the gold ring. She didn't know what Charlotte had borrowed. After all, Count Galinold was now on the front line of Philandon, and he couldn't be as idle as Count Brittany. He didn't know his daughter's thoughts, and he didn't have the urge to investigate Charlotte thoroughly. So Sophia didn't know what Anne knew. Seeing Charlotte was so cautious, she whispered, "I will keep this gift." Charlotte Mecklen's breakfast tasted very tasteless. Although he had been to the battlefield, it was because of this that he knew how dangerous the battlefield was. He did not have any special feelings for Sophia Galinold. As an ordinary friend, he did not want to see tragedy. Just like when he took Dorothy to the battlefield, he almost always placed this deputy in a safe place. Most of the time, Dorothy was in Machupi, the ancient orc fortress, which could be called Charlotte's base camp and the safest one among all the cities he controlled. Charlotte was the same with other friends and subordinates. He almost never used human lives to fill the front line. Many times, he would rather suffer defeat than to keep his subordinates safe. Charlotte was never a qualified commander. He should never be a qualified commander. After saying goodbye to Charlotte, Sophia Galinold finally put down that huge stone in her heart. She was a famous figure in all the major empires. In Fars, there was not even a young man under the age of 20 who could compare with her, even including men of the same age. Sophia Galinold's dream was never to talk about love, but to become a hero who could turn the tide and command thousands of troops. She stood up and said goodbye to Charlotte. When she was about to leave number 58, Champs-Élysées, Sophia drew the sword at her waist, cut off a strand of hair, handed it to Charlotte, and said, "Mr. Charlotte Mecklen, are you willing to keep it for me?" Charlotte sighed, took the strand of hair, clipped it into the diary that she never left, and whispered, "I am willing to pay 10 times the joy of fate, as long as they can bring you back safely." Sophia Galinold smiled slightly, and this time, she walked away without looking back. The roses of Strasbourg will also bloom. Chapter 342. The evil god deserves his bad luck. After Sophia Galinold left, Charlotte couldn't calm down for a long time. He went to Mecklen Manor alone for a while, and then went to pick up Anne for lunch at noon. Anne was in the general office of the central government, and she heard a lot of inside information in such a key department as the law enforcement department. When the two of them were eating, Anne said, "Because of the naval battle in the Sea of Giant Whales, we suffered too much loss. I heard that a group of army troops will be transferred to supplement the navy." Charlotte asked in surprise, "Has it come to the point where the army needs to be transferred?" Anne stuffed a small bite of bread and said, "The Empire is going to launch a bigger naval battle to completely block the navy of Byron in the port and not allow them to escort the trade lines on the sea. The war has been going on for almost a year, and everyone is short of supplies. The trade lines on the sea have become more important than before. I heard that some families in Strasbourg have begun to run out of food." Charlotte knew that this was inevitable in war. War is fought for resources, population, wealth, minerals, food, weapons. Everything is a resource, and will be ruthlessly consumed in war. Charlotte didn't really want to talk about the war. He listened to Anne talking about work, occasionally interrupting to lighten the atmosphere. When lunch was almost over, Anne whispered, "I took over your investigation. Originally they wanted to keep you in Strasbourg for half a year. After I took over, I helped you extend it to a year and a half, probably until the end of the war. You won't go to the battlefield." Charlotte was deeply moved, but also very curious, and asked, "Who are they? Why don't they want me to go to the battlefield?" Anne hesitated and said, "Some of them are my father's political enemies, and some probably want to interfere in post-war Yugoslavia and Behemoth, and some are just trying to take advantage of the situation. If you go to the battlefield again, such a large region, a principality, will be yours. On the contrary, that thing is just a clown, not an important reason." Aaron's cook had just arrived at the front line at this time and was sent to the stormtroopers. When he was in the law enforcement department, he could easily mobilize various resources to embarrass Charlotte, and seemed to be able to manipulate Charlotte's fate at will, but in a blink of an eye, he also became a plaything of fate, was roughly stuffed into the front line, and became the top stormtrooper. Charlotte still remembered Aaron's cook. He originally wanted to send the Golden Goat Rolf to kill the somewhat difficult enemy, but who would have thought that this guy actually predicted the danger in advance and let the old goat miss? Charlotte had a feeling that this guy would be his destined enemy, and the two might have the chance to fight. After lunch, Charlotte sent Anne back to the general office of the central government. He was a little bored, so he decided to find something for himself, clear the faith of the god of joy, and harvest some joy of fate. Charlotte didn't know what these joys of fate could do, but since they were rewards from the serpent of fate, they should be of some use. The most important thing is that Charlotte promised to pay 10 portions of the joy of destiny and protect Sophia Gallinold's safe return, but he didn't even have 1 portion of the joy of destiny. The snake of destiny could not agree to borrow. Destiny is a fair thing. If someone is happy, someone will inevitably be unlucky. Charlotte felt that she should not be unlucky, and Sophia Gallinold should not have bad luck, so she wronged the god of joy to be unlucky. As a god of joy, he did not grant joy to believers, but stole the joy of the world. This evil god deserved to be unlucky. Whether it is the old world or the new world, there are countless evil gods, and not every evil god is very powerful. Because many creatures failed to remain intact when they ascended to the god level. For example, the 2 divine creatures on St. Michael Island had obvious defects, which was why they were calculated by the old king. One became a Holy Spirit and now became the Whisper of Destiny, and the other became the name of the Holy Light God. Now it has become half disabled and unable to sail. Charlotte first went to the library to check the information about the god of joy. There was quite a lot of information about this evil god. He was originally a high priest of the Lord of Glory. He was highly respected and had superb cultivation. He somehow comprehended a kind of evil secret method that could steal the faith that belonged to the Lord of Glory. When his life came to an end, this high priest who had a flawless faith in his life could not help but have evil thoughts and use this secret method, and then, he was gone. According to records, this so-called evil god can only exist in legends and cannot appear in the real world at all. It is a relatively miserable incomplete. As long as the deeds of this evil god are constantly spread, they will be given a wonderful supernatural power, the power to make others unhappy. Charlotte originally thought that making people unhappy was not a valuable ability, but then she thought, if I had this kind of weird ability, and kept using it on the people I hated, making them unhappy no matter what they did, wouldn't this be the god of depression? This evil god is something, it must be my unshirkable responsibility to destroy the god of joy. How great a merit would it be to make the world depression-free? Charlotte originally wanted to cause trouble for these believers of the god of joy, but after thinking for a while, she suddenly thought, this evil god can only exist in legends. If the legend is gone, he can no longer exist. What if the legend changes? Will he change too? Anne once proposed to publish a special edition of novels about the Serpent of Fate, adding a brand new character to each novel, and having this character always mention a custom about the Serpent of Fate in the novel. This idea gave Charlotte an inspiration. He took out a copy of Charlotte's biography and thought about making a special edition of Charlotte's biography about the God of Joy. He erased the identity of the God of Joy as the great priest of the Lord of Glory and turned him into the pet of the Snake of Fate. He was loyal to his master, the Snake of Fate, and was particularly committed to promoting a custom, playing snake cards. Well, that's Guangdong Mahjong. Charlotte's biography, Special edition of the God of Joy stuffed all the legends about the God of Joy into it, making the number of words in this special edition almost double. Charlotte sent someone to send the new version of Charlotte's biography to Anne's publishing house, and he no longer cared about it. In the following days, the Fars Empire really started a new round of conscription, and sent a large number of land forces to the Navy. It also planned to build 5 more magic alchemy warships. The world in Strasbourg became more and more difficult. Even the shops on the Élysée Field Street began to close. Charlotte could no longer buy coffee, beer, fruit wine and other supplies anywhere, and could only rely on her own business group for transportation. The fleets of Ingrima, Fars, Byron, and even the Black Phoenix fought dozens of small naval battles on the Sea of Giant Whales. Both sides had their wins and losses, and were accumulating advantages in the war. A major war was about to break out. Chapter 343 This is the responsibility of His Majesty the Emperor, not the responsibility of us common people. Just as Charlotte was about to go out, she saw a thin boy waiting outside the door. He was a little embarrassed, but his eyes were firm. Yang Melian, an old acquaintance of Seagull City. Charlotte greeted him calmly. Yang, what can I do for you? Her tone was as calm as if she was asking an old acquaintance about the weather. Yang Melian whispered, I joined the army, but we didn't get any weapons. You know, this is not okay, so I want to borrow some weapons from you. Charlotte raised her eyebrows and said, join the army? Which unit? Yang Melian whispered, it's the Dragon Knights. Charlotte said, I've never heard of it. Yang Melian whispered, they were newly established not long ago. They used to be a local security group. The leader is a serious knight. Charlotte had complicated emotions, and finally said lightly, I will transfer you away. Don't stay in that knight group. They are pure cannon fodder. You will just die if you go there. Charlotte has fought in many battles and knows the Empire's military system well. This kind of knight group that was temporarily transferred from local troops has very low combat effectiveness and can only be used to fill the front line. The purpose of the soldier's existence is to die for friendly forces and use their lives to achieve some insignificant strategic goals. Yang Melian lowered her head and said, we've already agreed, it's not easy to go back on our word, not to mention, it's hard to find a job in Strasbourg. Without food, we'll soon starve to death. At least joining the army provides some way to survive. Charlotte became a little anxious and said, you have all been transferred to the Knights of Favonius, and the formalities will be completed later. As for the dragons, I'll take care of them. Now report to number 1 Falcon Street immediately. Yang Melian wanted to say something, but Charlotte said angrily, don't anger me. Even your damn Dragon Knights wouldn't dare to anger me. Follow my orders and report to number 1 Falcon Street immediately. Yang Melian bowed her head, saluted, turned around and ran away. Charlotte's mood was completely ruined. Since he crossed over, he has been constantly cleaning up the mess for Charlotte Mecklen. He was always walking on thin ice, fearing that his true identity would be exposed one day. Yang Melian was the past he least wanted to touch, but he could not watch the boy die. Charlotte sighed and asked Mrs. Nancy to inform Anne that he had something to do, and then went to Falcon Street. Charlotte did not go to the patrol army, but went to the Government Affairs Bureau to deal with Yang Melian's affairs first. With his power, it was easy to mobilize a group of people from a newly established knight group. A mere Dragon Knight group could not defy his will. In addition to Yang Melian's affairs, what made Charlotte uneasy was the current situation in Strasbourg. The Empire had issued a wartime order, and all civil servants had their weekly salaries halved. In other words, not to mention ordinary civilians, even the civil servants of the Empire had begun to be swept by the aftermath of the war. Mrs. Nancy didn't even buy food yesterday, so Charlotte had to have someone send a batch over. But he could maintain his own life, so how could he save the people of Strasbourg? Charlotte hoped that the war would end as soon as possible. In addition to the Lionheart dynasty, which had been keeping its troops inactive, the 4 empires had opened up at least 6 or 7 battlefields, and a large number of troops were deployed in each battlefield. Most of the bad news was no longer allowed to appear in the newspapers. Fortunately, Anne was able to access the war report, otherwise Charlotte would not know how bad a front was. Now people died every day in the front, and the number was shocking. Soon, Yang Melian and his friends were taken to the Government Affairs Bureau to work for the patrol army. There were basically no people there now, only some disabled veterans. Charlotte's salary was paid as usual and she also looked after the house. When the boy saw Charlotte, he was no longer as rebellious as before. Obviously, The double blow of life and society made him have a better understanding of reality. Charlotte didn't comfort him much, and said, "I will get you 50 people, and you will lead a combat team and be temporarily responsible for the public security in the Lucavero district." Yang couldn't help but say, "There is no public security in the Lucavero district. It is in chaos everywhere. Everyone lacks food and the most basic living supplies. Without enough food, public security can't be good." Charlotte glanced at him deeply and asked lightly, "Can you solve this problem?" Yang Milian shook her head hurriedly. Charlotte said, "Don't worry about things you can't worry about," Yang Milian whispered, "but you should be able to. I know the Bader Chamber of Commerce is very rich." Charlotte asked back, "So should I distribute the money of the Bader Chamber of Commerce to everyone?" Yang Milian mustered up the courage to say, "Why not?" Charlotte thought about it, asked someone to get a bag of centimes, handed it to Yang Milian, and said, "Go to the street and distribute this bag of centimes to everyone. Each person can only get one. When you come back, I will tell you the reason." Although Yang Milian could not understand Charlotte's words, she still went there in a hurry, and she didn't come back the whole afternoon. Charlotte still went to pick up Anne from get off work. The two of them could no longer eat out. Although the Val-d'Oise district was not like the Champs-Élysées where all the shops began to close, most restaurants did not have complete supplies, and the food they made was not very delicious. Charlotte had special channels and no shortage of supplies. Anne transferred a cook from home. The cook's cooking skills were classic Farce style. Although her table manners were far superior to Mrs. Plumsauce's, Charlotte still preferred the food made by Mrs. Plumsauce. It was not a question of cooking skills, but just the difference in taste. The next day, as soon as Charlotte opened the door, she saw Yang Milian. The young man was in a very embarrassed state and whispered, "Those people are so terrible. I told everyone to share, but they didn't listen at all. They rushed over to rob me with ferocious eyes, as if they wanted to eat me alive. I threw away my purse and scattered the centimes on the ground, but they still rushed over and wanted to search me for something else." Mr. Mecklin, why is this happening? Charlotte said lightly, "I don't know why it is like this, I just know it must be like this. The bad Chamber of Commerce can only protect itself, it can't save Strasbourg, only His Majesty the Emperor can save the people of Strasbourg. This is the responsibility of His Majesty the Emperor, not us ordinary people." There was another sentence that Charlotte didn't say, because he knew Yang Milian wouldn't understand. If the bad Chamber of Commerce rescued people, it would be like saying that they had a huge amount of supplies. How could the Emperor and the nobles not rob them? Yang Milian asked angrily, "Is there really nothing we can do?" Charlotte smiled and replied, "You can try to rebel." Chapter 344, The Queen Bee, a ship of such fame that it cannot be surpassed. Sophia Guéranold stood at the port, quietly looking into the distance. There was a gold ring in Sophia's palm. She sent it to 699 South Riverside Street, 7 days as agreed, but it was soon returned without saying anything. Sophia Guéranold thought that this was a failure to borrow a boat, but she did not resent Charlotte, but was deeply grateful. Charlotte must have made a great determination to ask for help, but it was natural that others would not lend such a precious thing as a warship. After all, she was going to the battlefield, not borrowing a boat for fun, and the probability of damage was very high. She came to receive another warship today. How could Earl Guéranold let his daughter suffer when Sophia went to the battlefield? So he funded a boat, let his daughter be the captain, and sent a group of family members for her to command. Elman, the butler of Earl Guéranold's mansion, accompanied Sophia behind. This middle-aged gentleman was dressed simply, had a majestic appearance, had no decorations on his body, and had a smile on his face. The Guéranord family has a huge influence in the army, but not in the navy. Earl Guéranord actually didn't want his daughter to join the navy, but Sophia insisted on sailing the sea, and the old earl was helpless. He couldn't let his daughter start from the status of an orderly, so he could only make all preparations. On the horizon, a small black dot suddenly appeared. Sophia was slightly excited. She thought it was her new ship, but the old butler Alman next to her changed his face and shouted, "Miss, let's go quickly, that's not the Earl's ship." Sophia Guéranold didn't insist. She trusted the old butler very much. The two of them were about to leave the port with people when a figure rose into the air and made a voice that could suppress the waves. "I am the Admiral of the Ingrimer Navy. I have been ordered to send a ship to Miss Sophia Guéranold." Alman was half believing and half doubting, floating in the air, and flew towards the ship. Half an hour later, An ancient magic warship with a similar appearance really approached the port. Almond's face was full of disbelief. As soon as he got off the warship, he said, "Miss, who is so generous as to lend you a queen bee? This is a legendary warship." "What is a legendary warship?" "There are only 12 warships in the entire 7 seas. The Fars Empire currently has only one, which is the vehicle of His Majesty Julius Axel, the Fontainebleau. Even with the power of Galanad, there is no way to get a legendary warship for his daughter. Well, the Earl's sphere of influence is in the army. In fact, he can't even mobilize an ordinary magic alchemy warship, even if he is the Minister of War. The Fars Navy has its own mountain." Sophia Galanad was shocked and stiff. She knew that Charlotte had borrowed a boat. Charlotte's expression at the time showed that the boat was very important, but Miss Galanad didn't think much about it. After all, it was a boat. Even the golden ring was returned. She thought that borrowing the boat failed and didn't take it to heart. After all, it was a boat. But Sophia Galanad never expected that it was really a ship. A queen bee, which was so famous that it could not be surpassed. She couldn't believe it at all, but such a large ancient magic warship was quietly parked there. Even if she didn't believe it, she had no choice. How much face does Mr. Charlotte Mecklin have to borrow such an ancient magic warship? It's not an ordinary ancient magic warship, it's a legendary warship. He actually did it for me. Miss Sophia Galanad burst into tears. She suddenly turned around and looked at Strasbourg. She had an impulse to fight Anne and snatch back the love of her life. When she saw the queen bee, she knew that she won this war. "Well, this is really a beautiful misunderstanding." The old butler, Alman, was still chattering. "The ship is fully staffed with sailors, and they are all the most experienced sailors. Although the people assigned to the young lady by the Earl are undoubtedly loyal, they are not very proficient in sailing. I was worried at first, but now I don't have to worry. I suspect that some of them should be retired from the Ingramer Royal Navy." And another group, "Miss, aren't you listening?" How could Sophia Galanad have the heart to listen to the old butler nagging? She took a few deep breaths of the salty ocean breeze, and then said, "Let's get on board." As soon as they approached the queen bee, the golden ring in Sophia Galanad's hand hummed, and the entire queen bee seemed to welcome its owner. Sophia Galanad was very surprised. She tried to wear the golden ring on her hand, and sure enough, the whole ship responded with joy. Alman showed an expression of sudden enlightenment and said, "I heard that this queen bee is the ship of the pirates of St. Michael's Island. Not long ago, Miss, aren't you listening? Sophia Galanad has already boarded the ship proudly. This is the ship that Charlotte lent her. When your sweetheart comes to pick you up on a colorful cloud. Who the hell cares where the colorful cloud comes from?" The old housekeeper didn't understand this. A few hours later, Sophia was already familiar with the queen bee. After all, there were people on the ship who explained to her how to operate the ship, how to open the magic circle, and how to sail. There was another ship on the sea, which was painted with the family logo of Galanad. It was a newly built warship. Although it was not a magic alchemy warship, it was already a top-notch big guy among ordinary warships. The sailors on the ship were also hired by the old earl with a lot of money. He worked hard for his daughter. Alman had to report to Sophia Galanad again and asked, "The ship that the old count sent you is here. Do you want to take it?" Sophia Galanad stroked the captain's cabin of the queen bee and said lightly, "Let it be a supply ship, we will set off now. As the daughter of the Galanad family, it is time for me to serve the empire." After the 2 warships were filled with supplies, they left the port and went deep into the sea. When the 2 ships were surrounded by the vast sea, suddenly the queen bee lit up with a dim light, once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. 10 times of clear light shining. No one knew what happened, even the old butler Alman, who was a saint, did not notice it, but in that instant, it seemed that everyone sensed that the queen bee was a little different. Charlotte, who was far away in Strasbourg, suddenly felt that he seemed to have a large debt, but he carefully calculated his wealth and found that he had no debts at all. Even the house payment at number 58 Elysée Field Street had been paid off long ago. Where did this feeling of suddenly owing a lot of money come from? Charlotte was puzzled. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345, The Custom of the Snake of Fate, Playing the Snake Card. Charlotte had nothing to do in Strasbourg, and she was really restless, so she mobilized several gang members in the Lucavero district. Well, his Knights of Favonius were everywhere, in Behemoth, South Serafia, Cappadocia, St. Michael's Island, and Machupi, but there were almost none in Strasbourg, so she could only borrow gang members. In order to recruit these people, he also swept the gangs in the Lucavero district, leaving only the Knights of Favonius in the district under his rule, without any second underground force. After mobilizing these gang members, he arrested the believers of the God of Joy according to the list on the divine revelation of the Serpent of Fate. The divine revelation given to Charlotte by the Serpent of Fate was very complete, and Charlotte swept away all the believers of the God of Joy in Strasbourg. Originally, he thought that these evil God believers should be more or less capable, but what Charlotte did not expect was that most of them were ordinary people, and there was not even a single extraordinary person. The special edition of Charlotte's biography by the God of Joy has been published. In the special edition of Charlotte's biography by the God of Joy is the pet of the Snake of Fate, loyal to his master, and is particularly committed to promoting a custom, playing snake cards. Note, the relevant content of chapter 340 has been modified. Yes, it is Guangdong Mahjong. The new edition of Charlotte's biography is slightly more than 10 times more expensive than the regular edition, because he not only describes in detail the various rules of playing snake cards in the novel, such as the ranking and the method of playing Guangdong Mahjong, but also relies on explaining the playing method of Guangdong Mahjong, cramming more than 30,000 words, and each book also comes with a deck of snake cards. Charlotte did not make things difficult for these believers of the God of Joy, but only gave each person a new edition of Charlotte's biography and asked them to memorize it. Those who memorized it only had to pay a fine to go home. This was not because Charlotte was greedy for money, but mainly to break even the cost of the new edition of Charlotte's biography. After all, a deck of snake cards is also quite expensive. Those who could not memorize it had one meal a day, and each meal was no more than half a fist-sized vegetable ball. Such a cruel learning environment made these Zishan believers memorize very quickly. After only a few days, some people could memorize 1/3 of the chapters. Even the slowest ones could memorize 8 or 10 pages. However, the fastest learner must be the snake card. More than half of this group of unlucky Zishan believers have mastered the snake card, and the rest can also read the anime and know how to win the game. Charlotte did not expect that the Zishan Special Edition Charlotte's MLP, which he thought was too expensive and stuffed with countless nonsense, would have very poor sales. As a result, as soon as this new book was put on the shelves, it entered a hot selling mode. It was not only popular in Strasbourg, but also merchants from all over Fars came to buy it, and some merchants were not even book dealers. What Charlotte did not know was that even the Red Dragon Emperor and the Lionheart Emperor had a new version of Charlotte's biography on their bedside. Because of the appearance of this new version of the book, the harem of the Lionheart Emperor became much more harmonious, and the more than a dozen concubines of the Lionheart Emperor formed several fixed snake card partners. When the custom of playing snake cards spread in Strasbourg, the second naval battle between the four countries also slowly kicked off. The war was instigated by the navy of Byron this time, and they ambushed the northern fleet of Duchess Misu. Menelman got the news and led his Imperial Rose fleet to join the battle. Soon, the fleets of Black Phoenix and Ingrima also arrived at the battlefield one after another. However, the most legendary person in this naval battle was not any of the above people, but the newly joined Strasbourg Rose, Miss Sophia Gallinold. With the speed of the Queen Bee, this lady sank 3 magic alchemy warships of Byron in succession, creating a gap for the northern fleet of Duchess Misu. The Duchess, who escaped from the predicament, was calm and commanded the fleet to counterattack. The two sides fought fiercely on the vast sea for 12 days and nights. The first to collapse was the Black Phoenix fleet, and even the flagship was captured by Menelman. At the same time, another magic alchemy warship was also captured, and a large number of ordinary warships were also seized by the Imperial Rose. Although Menelman rushed to help Charlotte with a saint rank, he had 3 more saint ranks in his hands, and with her, there were 5. The 3 newcomers were not the 3 imprisoned on St. Michael Island. 2 of them were pirates, and the other was Septimius, the non-cannibal of the Orc Assassin League. It was because there were enough saint ranks that Menelman was able to achieve such a brilliant victory. The Black Phoenix fleet collapsed, and the Byron fleet was unable to support itself. In order to save the seeds of the navy, it had to withdraw from the battle. The northern fleet, the Imperial Rose fleet, and the Queen Bee chased all the way until they forced Byron's fleet back to the port, and then set sail to return. In this battle, the casualties of both sides were similar. Fars and Ingrima also suffered heavy losses. The Northern Fleet was surrounded first and even lost 3 magic alchemy warships, but the Black Phoenix fleet was defeated and Byron's fleet was forced back to the port. Strategically, Fars and Ingrima won a great victory. Mecklenburg was originally far inferior to Duchess Misu, but after this battle, her 5 magic alchemy warships were intact, and she also captured 2 of the Black Phoenix's magic alchemy warships. Her strength suddenly became enough to be on par with the Northern Fleet. Although Duchess Misu won a great victory and achieved many results, she lost 3 magic alchemy warships and only captured 1 in the battle, which was seriously damaged and needed to be repaired before it could be put into battle. The strength of the Northern Fleet declined greatly. Sophia Galanol became famous because of this battle. As the Minister of War, Count Galanid had no hand in the navy before, but this time he took the opportunity to build a fleet for his daughter, making himself the new mountaintop of the Imperial Navy. Just when everyone thought that Sophia Galanid would name the new fleet the Rose Fleet, or the Galanid Fleet, the young lady named the fleet, East Wind. No one knew that Sophia Galanid meant, isn't Anne the goddess of the West Wind? Isn't your Night Order the West Wind Knights? I want to see whether the West Wind overwhelms the East Wind, or the East Wind overwhelms the West Wind, whether the Night Order is brilliant in martial arts, or the fleet is prosperous in martial arts. This naval battle not only changed the naval offensive and defensive postures of several countries, but also fundamentally changed the naval pattern of the Fars Empire. No one knew that this was a sign of a new era. The wind has gradually blown. After the 2 naval battles, Byron felt that he could not compete with a combined fleet of Ingrima and Fars on the ocean, so he shifted the focus of the war back to Flanders. In more than 10 days, he launched 7 or 8 large-scale battles in succession. Both sides once again shed countless blood on this land, and 70,000 to 80,000 soldiers died. Charlotte's good days in Strasbourg were over. Chapter 346, South of the Continent, Orc Tribe. Even with Anne in a key position, Charlotte Mecklen still had to go to the front again. But this time, he was not able to return to the Principality of Behemoth, or the South Seraph War Zone, and of course he would not be thrown into a meat grinder like Ferlanden, but was sent to open up a brand new battlefield. This offensive is called the Southern Offensive. The Empire has deployed a total of 5 Knight Orders, including 3 Holy Orders. Well, not including the Golden Gothralf of the Knights of Favonius and the Leopard God Domitian, because neither of them is in the Empire's battle sequence. The Old Continent is divided into 2 parts, separated by an extremely long strait. This strait is also called the Red Dragon Sea. It is about 5,000 kilometers long, with the widest part being several hundred kilometers, and the narrowest part being only 20 to 30 kilometers. It is extremely deep. The northern shore of the strait is full of mountains, and the southern shore is mostly plains. It is a unique landform that has never existed on the Earth. The 5 great empires are all in the northern continent. Originally, the ancient Orc dynasty was also in the northern continent. However, after the Orc dynasty was destroyed, it was driven out of the northern continent by the Sherlock dynasty and forced to enter the southern continent, forming countless tribes of all sizes. Due to geographical reasons, after the old people of the Orc dynasty entered the southern continent, although they multiplied and thrived, they no longer had any power to counterattack. Last time, the Orc tribal alliance used extraordinary power to sneak into the vicinity of Strasbourg, but was defeated in one fell swoop. The Orc elites were destroyed, but a small part of them escaped back to the vicinity of the Red Dragon Strait. Fars was busy on various battlefields and had no time to take care of this group of orcs for the time being. Under the leadership of several orc saints, they occupied a bridgehead in the northern continent. For more than half a year, the orcs have gradually expanded their occupied areas and continuously recruited orcs from the southern continent. Now they have formed a camp with hundreds of thousands of orcs. The Fars Empire naturally has no ability to attack the southern continent. Although this offensive is named the Southern Offensive, its purpose is to drive the orcs back across the Red Dragon Strait, south of the continent, the Orc tribe. It is the eternal headache of the Fars Empire. Because of the 5 great empires, Fars is in the southernmost part, and only Fars needs to face the Orc tribes of the southern continent. Charlotte had to say goodbye to Anne and left Strasbourg to summon the scattered Knights of Favonius, but he did not call back all the members of the Knights, and still left Dorothy in Machupi. Belissa was originally Dorothy's deputy and would also stay in Machupi, but Charlotte had few talents, so he could only let Belissa take charge of the Principality of Behemoth. Doberman and Yellow Bear were sent to guard the South Seraph war zone. Charlotte only took Anastasia, all the maze guards and more than 5,000 people, as well as the Golden Goat Rolf and the Leopard God Domitian, and set off to the southernmost part of the Fars Empire. After marching for more than 10 days, there were almost no lively cities. After passing a small town called Positano, there was no living person in every village and town on the road. Wherever the orcs passed, no grass was left, and everyone was eaten. Although Charlotte had a few orc friends and knew that some orcs did not eat people, he was still excited and wanted to kill more orcs. After more than a month of marching, the Knights of Favonius finally arrived at the Red Dragon Strait. Originally, there were more than 10 cities on the north bank of the Red Dragon Strait, which were strictly guarded against orcs, but now these cities are empty. Most of the residents have fled, and even the army has withdrawn. Those who did not come in left have become food for the orcs. Charlotte arrived at the Red Dragon Strait and found that only the Knights of Favonius came. The defeated army of the Orc Tribe Alliance has at least 5 or more saints, and now they have recruited hundreds of thousands of orcs. How can the Knights of Favonius win the battle? He wanted to retreat temporarily at that time. He had to wait until the rest of the knights arrived and the friendly forces came up before he would come back. As Charlotte was reorganizing the army, a messenger from Strasbourg arrived, delivering not only the latest orders but also the latest intelligence. This time, Strasbourg sent 5 knights, commanded by 3 saints, but the battle line of Philandon suddenly became urgent, and 4 of them had to be withdrawn. Only Charlotte's knights received orders to wait for assistance on the spot, and to repel the orcs as much as possible if they attacked. Charlotte received a battle report, and his face was livid. How could he not know that someone was plotting against him? Moreover, the person who used this trick was quite insidious and vicious, avoiding all possible accidents that might interfere. Count Gerlanid had been in Philandon all the time, and it was impossible for him to pay attention to the new battlefield in the south. Menelman's fleet was on the sea, and the intelligence was usually delayed. Even if Count Brittany wanted to take action, it would be too late, because he was also transferred to support Philandon. After the messenger from Strasbourg delivered the order and intelligence, he planned to leave. Without any hesitation, Charlotte pulled out a knight's lance and threw it with all her might, pinning the imperial capital's messenger to the ground. As long as the messenger was killed, she could shirk her responsibility by saying that she had not received the empire's order, which would give her more room for maneuver. Although the messenger might be innocent, Charlotte could not care less. Leaving the messenger alive would be irresponsible for the lives of all the soldiers of the Knights of Favonius. After killing the messenger, Charlotte ordered, "Attack Dubrovnik." The camp occupied by the orcs was in the middle of the Red Dragon Strait, but Dubrovnik was the easternmost part of the Red Dragon Strait and was itself a port. From here, ships could sail a few hundred kilometers at most to reach Zermatt, a city on the island of Galling. Charlotte did not want to travel a long distance back in the conventional way, so she planned to turn Dubrovnik into a maze, and then use the maze passage to return to Machupi. After he evacuates the Knights of Favonius, he will find out who framed him. He even managed to pull off the bizarre scene where 5 knights set out, only 1 arrived, and the other 4 were recalled. Once he finds this person, Charlotte will definitely kill him by any means necessary. The old goat still maintained his silent and cold personality, but Domitian could not help but said, "If I only let you come here alone, wouldn't that be sending you to your death?" Charlotte said lightly, "It's not that easy for me to die." There was something he didn't say in his heart. At worst, I can summon the evil god. Make a big one. Domitian sighed and said, "Do you want me to be a lobbyist for you? Although I am not too familiar with these old guys, I have some friendship." Charlotte shook her head and said, "This is a war. This is a battlefield. Personal friendship is useless. Even your friendship will be used by others to set a trap for us." Charlotte is not a qualified commander, nor a qualified keyboard strategist, but he has really seen countless keyboard strategists, and knows that at this time, he must not contact the enemy. Chapter 347, The King of Explosive Soldiers. As an assassin, Domitian was unrivaled and had even assassinated the Holy Order. But as a military commander and leader, he made many stupid moves, and he could not understand why what he did was wrong and what was the right way. That's why Menelman sent him to help Charlotte. Charlotte needed the Holy Order, and the battle on the sea needed a commander, especially since Menelman only had 1 magic alchemy warship at that time. The orcs occupied all the cities in the Red Dragon Sea, but most of the orcs shrank into the camp in the middle of the Red Dragon Sea, and there were very few orcs in Dubrovnik. Charlotte led the team personally and led the maze guards to attack Dubrovnik. There were thousands of orcs left here, but they only resisted for half an hour before they completely collapsed. After hundreds of orcs were killed, the rest chose to surrender. Charlotte didn't waste any time and immediately mazed Dubrovnik. What surprised him was that the condition for mazing Dubrovnik was to obtain 18 warships, which was the same as the condition for mazing Cappadocia. As a port city, Dubrovnik already had many ships. After the city was occupied by the orcs, these ships were not destroyed. The orcs were not good at sailing and did not transform them into warships. These ships were used to transport orcs across the Red Dragon Strait. Now Dubrovnik's ships are all across the strait, and Charlotte can only wait for them to come back. But Charlotte didn't just wait quietly. He also sent a messenger to Cappadocia to ask for a batch of warships from senior sister Middleman. Dubrovnik is a very beautiful city. It is not a small city like Cappadocia with a very small population. Before the orcs came, Dubrovnik had a population of more than 50,000, with developed trade and fisheries. The scenery was not even inferior to the famous seaside resort city of Senes in the empire. However, the opposite of Dubrovnik is the southern continent, and the orcs often threatened the residents here, resulting in no one coming to travel and vacation. After all, the biggest advantage of the tourist area must be safety, not scenery. More than 1,000 maze guards and 5,000 knights of Favonius, after taking over the city, could not fill this beautiful seaside city. Charlotte just wanted to withdraw to Strasbourg as soon as possible, and had no interest in running the city. Less than 2 days after the Knights of Favonius occupied Dubrovnik, an orc militia came from the camp. Charlotte asked the Golden Goat Raff and the Leopard God a mission to fly over from the air to cut off the retreat of the orc militia. Under the siege of the powerful enemy, the orc militia chose to surrender obediently. Charlotte interrogated them once and found out that the orc camp had been divided for a long time because of the struggle for power. So he hardly saw any orc scouts along the way. The orcs were short of food, especially since they occupied a piece of land in the north of the strait. There was almost no output here, and they had to feed hundreds of thousands of orcs. Food could only be transported from the southern continent, but the orcs in the southern continent were also short of food. This contradiction was simply unsolvable. Moreover, this group of orcs had eaten up all the edible things nearby. Even if they wanted to plunder, they couldn't do it. It was precisely because the orc camp fell apart, and several saints each brought a group of supporters. And they kept fighting among themselves, that they didn't even notice that a human army had occupied Dubrovnik. This orc militia came to ask for food. Dubrovnik is close to the giant whale sea, where you can fish and the food is slightly more abundant. Charlotte detained these orc militias, and within a day, another orc militia came. After Charlotte surrounded the second orc militia and forced them to surrender, he began to feel a little annoyed. Now he had more orc captives than the Knights of Favonius. These orc soldiers were not cannibals, so he couldn't send them to Cappadocia to Middleman. There was no need to accept cannibalistic orcs. Charlotte didn't have that much food to feed the orc captives. Originally, he planned to turn them into maze guards after Dubrovnik was maze-like, which would increase the combat power. However, the fleet of Dubrovnik was late, and more orcs came to ask for food, which was really difficult to deal with. Charlotte was hesitating whether to kill a group of captives first. He couldn't let these captives go. Once he provoked the orc army, it would be the end of him. At this time, the fleet of Dubrovnik came back. Charlotte was overjoyed. She picked out the orcs from the maze guards and boarded the port. There were more than 50 ships in this fleet, including ships from other orc tribes, transporting a total of more than 10,000 orcs. These orcs saw that the people coming and going in the port were still the same kind, so they were not vigilant. Most of the orcs boarded the port, and Charlotte gave an order, and the Knights of Favonius launched an attack. With 2 saints and more than 20 extraordinary maze guards, Charlotte quickly controlled the situation. These orcs surrendered quickly. Charlotte not only captured more than 10,000 orcs, but also successfully captured more than 50 ships. Without any surprises, Dubrovnik quickly completed the 3 mazes and opened the passage to other mazes. Charlotte did not rush to retreat, but selected more than 10,000 captured orcs, and finally selected less than 500 non-cannibals. He sent these orcs who believed in non-cannibalism to Cappadocia, and turned the remaining nearly 20,000 orcs into maze guards. So far, Charlotte's maze guards have exceeded 20,000. Domitian witnessed everything Charlotte did, and finally could only sigh. He knew that humans would never tolerate orcs who had eaten people. Even people like Charlotte, who had no prejudice or ill feelings towards orcs, and even had orc friends, still could not tolerate orcs who had eaten people. But seeing nearly 20,000 orcs being transformed into maze guards, the old leopard man was still in a bad mood. However, the old leopard man was relatively open-minded and believed that although the maze guards were evil, they were not dead. After all, the largest evil group in the old world is vampires, and vampires live quite comfortably. So Domitian could barely accept this result. After Charlotte had 20,000 maze guards, she had a way out and was not in a hurry to leave. Dubrovnik's geographical location is very important. If he can take this city in the Red Dragon Sea, his caravan can go to more places. Charlotte alone, of course, can't do anything about the orc camp with more than 5 saints, but he can find reinforcements. Charlotte quickly wrote another letter and sent someone to ask Menelman for help, hoping that this senior sister can come to help her. Chapter 348 The Youngest Orc Saint. On the 10th day after Charlotte occupied Dubrovnik, a proper orc army appeared outside the city. The leader was an elephant man, who roared very irritably. Most of his team was elephant men, and there were some other orcs, but strangely, these were not aggressive orcs, and they looked trembling and ragged. The elephant man stood at the foot of the city and roared loudly, "I am Agon, the overlord of the elephant men. Give me food, we are going back to the southern continent." Charlotte glanced at these orcs, felt very strange, and shouted, "Are you non-cannibals?" Agon roared, "I am a non-cannibal, I am tired of war, and I want to go back to the southern continent." Charlotte waved her hand and shouted, "Let's go into the city." The elephant man Agon led his men into the city. His orc army had as many as 6 or 7,000 people. When everyone entered the city, Charlotte gave an order, and 2 saints slowly floated into the air. 20,000 maze guards and 5,000 soldiers of the Knights of Favonius occupied advantageous terrain, set up their rifles, and pointed the black muzzles at the orcs. Agon was already in a bad mood, and he became even more angry at this moment. He shouted, "Despicable! Are you from a misfit, black dragon, or Chudello?" Charlotte said, "We are humans and orcs who believe in non-cannibalism." Agon suppressed his temper and shouted, "We are also non-cannibals. You let us go and give us food. We don't want to fight." Charlotte shook her head and said, "Non-cannibals must unite. You either fight and die to the last man, or join us and build the best life together." Anger grew on Agon's face and he shouted, "Bullshit, you are just an ambitious person." Charlotte answered flatly, "Yes, I am an ambitious person, I have a dream. Orcs are also human beings, no different from humans. They can live in the sun, live by farming, breeding, fishing, hunting, trading, and all normal means. They don't need to fight each other, they don't need to take up swords and guns for a living, they don't need to worry about tomorrow." Agon was furious at first, but he soon listened to him and couldn't help but said, "But humans will not be willing to accept orcs, so what you said is useless." Charlotte pointed and said, "I have already obtained a large piece of land on Galling Island, and have also gained the support of a group of humans and orcs who have accepted the concept of non-cannibals. I need more people to join us." The elephant man Agon was silent for a long time, and said, "I agree with your idea, but I will not join. I will take them back to the southern continent." Charlotte pointed to the sky and said, "Either join or die." The elephant man Agon looked up at the sky and said, "If I can defeat them, can I leave?" Charlotte was slightly surprised, glanced at the golden goat Rolf and the old leopard man Domitian, and thought to herself, "Defeat them? What kind of joke is this elephant man playing on Ingrima?" Then Charlotte sighed and almost popped her eyes out. The elephant man Agon slowly rose into the air and roared in a low voice, "I don't want to fight, and I don't want to join you. Don't hurt innocent people. I will fight them to decide whether to stay or go." Domitian shouted in a low voice, "Charlotte, Agon is the first genius of the orcs. He is also the youngest holy level among our orcs. I am not his opponent alone." Charlotte finally understood why the elephant man Agon wanted to challenge the old goat and Domitian at the same time. It turned out that this guy was really confident and not arrogant. He couldn't help but say, "Why didn't you say it just now?" Domitian looked helpless and said, "I didn't expect that you would fight to the death." Charlotte thought to herself, "Don't I want to swallow this group of orcs, Among the more than 10,000 orcs coming from the southern continent, only more than 500 non-cannibals can be picked out. The orcs who have been in the northern continent for a long time should not be able to jump out even 5 non-cannibals. So when Charlotte heard the elephant man Gon say that he was a non-cannibal, she wanted to swallow up these orcs. She thought that using tough means could solve the problem as soon as possible, but she didn't expect to meet the elephant man Gon, the first genius of the orcs. Charlotte took a deep breath and shouted, "Gon! If you lose, stay and help me." The elephant man Gon shook his huge head and said, "No, I won't lose. Even if I lose, I can leave. I won't stay. I must go back to the southern continent." Charlotte had to admit that if Gon really had to leave, the golden goat Rolf and the old leopard man might not be able to keep this guy. The elephant man was the most tough and thick among the orcs. The old goat now had no weapons at hand. The killer whale was given to Annie by him, and it might not be able to break this guy's defense. Not to mention the old leopard man, who is tall, fast, and powerful. Charlotte pondered for a moment and shouted, "Let you go and leave these orcs behind." Ogon growled and shouted, "I must take them back to the southern continent." Charlotte was furious and said, "Domitian, give your sword to the old goat." Domitian was reluctant to leave. He took out the Daohe and threw it to the golden goat Rolf. He immediately withdrew from the battlefield and landed beside Charlotte, whispering, "Ogon is not only the #1 genius of the orcs, but also possesses one of the 10 magic weapons of the orcs, the dragon hammer. Although the golden goat Rolf is an old-fashioned saint, he may not be Ogon's opponent." Charlotte couldn't help asking, "Why does this guy have to go back to the southern continent?" Domitian whispered, "The elephant people pay special attention to their ancestral land." Charlotte suddenly realized and said, "The ancestral land of the elephant peoples in the southern continent?" Domitian replied, "The earliest ancestral land is in Machupi." Charlotte's eyes lit up immediately, and she thought, "Machupi is my territory." Charlotte didn't listen carefully to what Domitian said next. He looked up at the sky. Ogon and the golden goat Rolf had already started fighting. Both of them were at the peak of the holy level. As soon as they made a move, the wind and clouds changed color. The clouds in the sky were cut by the fighting spirit and turned into strands of clouds. The old goat stepped in the sea, and his confidence increased greatly. Every sword was blessed with the power of boundless seawater, and every sword had the power of a landslide and tsunami. The elephant man Ogon didn't use any weapons, but just punched out in an ordinary way, but every blow was as powerful as the old goat who used the stepping sea. The elephant man's strength can also be ranked in the top 3 among the orcs. If it is limited to land orcs, it is the undisputed first. It was the first time that Charlotte saw such a pure holy level battle of strength. He took a deep breath and thought to himself, "The old goat is really not good." Chapter 349. Do you think I'm stupid? Of course, the golden goat Rolf was not incompetent. The old goat was actually quite capable. After all, he was an old-fashioned saint who had been roaming the sea of giant whales for many years. Although Ogon was the first genius of the orcs, he was young after all, and had 30 years less skills than the old goat. It was not so easy to catch up. Even Menelman could not defeat the old goat in a one-on-one battle. The golden goat Rolf had a lot of ocean-related fighting spirit and ocean-related spells. His means of fighting against the enemy were ever-changing. With the sea walking in his hand, he evened the gap in strength between humans and elephants. The elephant man Ogon originally wanted to fight 2 people at once. He knew the strength of Domitian and thought that the golden goat Rolf was about the same as the old leopard man. He was quite confident, but he did not expect that the strength of the old goat was far greater than that of Domitian. The 2 saints fought for 3 or 4 hours, and the clouds in the sky were torn apart, like pieces of lint. Although Ogon and the old goat deliberately gathered their strength and did not affect the people below, the momentum was still fierce enough to shock people. During these 3 or 4 hours, Charlotte was not idle. After watching the battle for a while, he commanded the maze guards to cut the orc army apart. Anyone who resisted would be beaten up by several extraordinary orcs and made into submission. Most of this orc army were elephant people, and a small number were other docile orcs. The elephant people were very strong in combat. If they fought normally, they could resist for a long time, but they could not withstand the maze guards under Charlotte, who were too many extraordinary. Charlotte forced the orcs to surrender, and after identifying whether they were non-cannibals, he sent them to Cappadocia one by one. The battle in the sky was not over yet, and the orcs who broke into Dubrovnik had been sent away by Charlotte, without even a hair left. When the Argonne War started, he never thought that the orcs he brought would be stolen by Charlotte. Domitian watched Charlotte do his job skillfully and send away the orcs led by Argonne, and thought to himself, Mr. Mechlin is really a good troublemaker. Let's see how he will face Argonne's anger next. Argonne looked up to the sky and howled, and the fighting spirit on his body condensed into the form of 3 giant elephants. This was a unique sign of the elephant tribe practicing bloodthirsty fighting spirit. Each giant elephant condensed with fighting spirit could increase Argonne's own strength. 3 giant elephants could allow Argonne to use 4 times his own strength. The golden goat Rolf also used all his strength, pointed at the sea with a rapier in his hand, and shouted, "Wave roll!" The endless seawater turned into a waterspout, rushed into the sky, and turned into a surging wave. The 2 men were very strong, and could fight for 3 days and 3 nights without any hesitation. However, Charlotte did not want them to continue fighting and shouted, "Argonne! Your army suddenly rushed out of the city and I failed to stop them." The elephant man Argonne was getting more and more excited and his fighting spirit was getting higher and higher. Suddenly, he heard Charlotte shouting and looked down. He was so focused on the battle that he did not notice that his army was really gone. Argonne left behind the golden goat Rolf and fell to the ground. He looked around and found that none of his men were left. He could not help but pull the old leopard man and shouted, "Where are my men?" Domitian said, "They really left on their own. If you don't believe me, ask Charlotte." Argonne left the old leopard man to look for Charlotte. Charlotte hid in the depths of the maze without hesitation. It was too dangerous to chat with a holy elephant man. Charlotte's voice echoed throughout Dubrovnik. He shouted, "Your people have indeed left, and we dare not stop them." Argonne cursed loudly, "Do you think I'm stupid? You must have done something wrong." He smashed the house with 1 punch and shouted, "Come out, let me kill you." Charlotte replied loudly, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Argonne was furious and smashed more than 10 houses with his fists. Charlotte shouted, "If you want, we can withdraw from Dubrovnik. How about you spend a few more days to slowly demolish the city?" Argonne knew that it would be useless to demolish the houses, so he stopped angrily and shouted, "It must be you who took my people away. Hand them over, and I won't kill you." The golden goat Rolf also landed. The old goat still tried very hard to maintain his cold and aloof personality. He didn't say a word, but the ocean-type fighting spirit on his body became more and more turbulent. The elephant man Argonne knew that this old man was very powerful and was definitely not inferior to himself. He could only gather his strength and guard against the old goat's sudden attack. As the first genius of the orcs, he not only made rapid progress in training, but also had considerable combat experience. With the protection of the old goat, Charlotte felt much more at ease and shouted, "You are not making specious arguments, forcing others to do things, forcing a confession, and forcing. Isn't this what a hero does? You are just bullying me. I don't have as much time to practice as you. If I advance to the saint level, do you dare to duel with me?" Charlotte was helpless against someone like the elephant man Argonne. Argonne had made up his mind about a certain truth, and no matter what others said, there was no way to change his opinion. He wanted to keep the matter of Machupi as a trump card and not let it go easily. Argonne yelled and cursed loudly, and the 2 exchanged sharp words. At the end, Argonne felt that he could not win the argument with Charlotte. He yelled and pressed his fists, hitting the ground hard. The ground suddenly collapsed, and countless cracks spread to the surroundings, breaking the road surface of a street in Dubrovnik. Charlotte couldn't help but feel a little frightened in the face of such a fierce and heroic punch. She thought to herself, "Bloody Glory is not good at hard work. Even if I am promoted to the saint level, I will not be his opponent in a head-on battle. I must win by surprise." Seeing that the time was ripe, Charlotte released the big killer and shouted, "It's really not a trick." They heard that Machupi is now in the hands of the leopard people, so they left in a hurry. Argonne was slightly stunned. Although he still thought that Charlotte was talking nonsense, Machupi was the ancestral land of the elephant people. Since the fall of the Orc dynasty, all the orcs have been driven out of the northern continent. Being able to return to Machupi has been the dream of all the elephant people. But even the most stubborn elephant man knew that it was impossible to take back Machupi, unless the human empire was conquered and the Orc dynasty was revived. Argonne gasped, and a voice in his heart shouted, "This guy is a liar. This kind of thing is impossible." But there was also a glimmer of hope, hoping that this was true. He shouted loudly, "How could the leopard people occupy Machupi? That is near the capital of the Fars Empire. Those powerful humans will not allow the orcs to live there." Charlotte spread her hands and said, I have helped the leopard people get citizenship of the Fars Empire. They are no longer orcs, but humans. How can it be impossible for them to live in Strasbourg? Chapter 350, Wisdom and Courage. Orcs are also human, but only those who don't eat humans are human. Charlotte's voice fell into the ears of the elephant man Agon, like a devil who was persuading them step by step. He knew that the future Charlotte talked about might be the best future for the orcs. Agon also knew that whether they returned to the southern continent or stayed on the north bank of the Red Dragon Strait, the orcs would never have a future. The southern continent was frequently hit by disasters. There was a drought every year and a rainstorm every year. Various monsters, strange, evil, and ferocious giant monsters often attacked the orcs. Many orc tribes lived a prosperous life last year, but the whole tribe was gone the next year. But staying on the north bank of the Red Dragon Strait, there was no way to survive. There was almost no food here, and the orcs could not transport enough food from the southern continent. Even the food in the southern continent was not enough, and they ate up all the nearby humans. Unless they attacked the Fars Empire again, but they were fooled by Baron to attack Strasbourg, but they lost countless orc elites in the city, and no one wanted to work for Baron anymore. This is also one of the important reasons why the orc camp did not take action. The orcs no longer wanted to fight. The elephant man Agon shook his head, which had been confused by Charlotte, and said loudly, I know. It was you who took my people away. No matter what you say, it can't change this fact. Hand over all the people, or I will kill you. Agon suddenly made a move, and his huge palm slapped the air, and beat more than 10 mace guards into pulp. He shouted loudly, I really know how to kill people. Your two holy ranks can't protect these ordinary warriors. Charlotte was silent for a moment. Just when Agon was about to kill again to establish his authority, he issued an attack order. The mace guards fought bravely, fearless of life and death, and launched an attack on the first genius of the orcs. The golden goat Rolf and the leopard god Domitian also joined the battle. Agon killed more than 100 mace guards, but saw that these soldiers were still rushing forward and behind, fearless of death, and no one retreated. He was also surprised and shouted, Aren't you afraid of death? Charlotte's voice became cold and said, It's you who want to kill people, it's you who want to fight. I don't know the whereabouts of those orcs. They did leave on their own, but since you insist on fighting, I will fight for you. I promise, if you kill my people, I will let the elephant people die as many people. You try your best to kill. Agon hesitated for a moment, and was swept by the old goat's sword, breaking his protective fighting spirit and killing the giant elephant condensed by fighting spirit. Although he immediately urged his fighting spirit and condensed another one, his momentum had already declined slightly. Agon howled and flew into the air again, and did not choose to continue to attack the maze guards. The golden goat Rolf and the leopard god Domitian chased him closely and rushed into the sky. This time the battle situation was different. Although the old leopard man was slightly weaker, he was a saint-level assassin after all and was best at finding flaws. With his assistance, Agon had a very hard time fighting. Every time he tried his best to fight the old goat, Domitian would attack him and point directly at the node where his fighting spirit was running, forcing him to stop. After fighting for less than half an hour, Agon was already at a disadvantage. He fought with a golden goat Rolf and Domitian for 70 or 80 moves, and suddenly roared and turned away. The golden goat Rolf chased him head-on, but Domitian relied on his faster speed to go around to the front to intercept. Agon was indeed worthy of being the first genius of the orcs. With the joint efforts of the two saints, he still escaped more than 10 kilometers in one breath. Charlotte sighed slightly in her heart, knowing that the golden goat Rolf and Domitian could not kill the elephant man. Even if they could really kill Agon, they would have to sacrifice at least one life. He did not want anything to happen to the golden goat Rolf, nor did he want Domitian to die, so he could only give the order to retreat. The golden goat Rolf and Domitian gave up the pursuit, supported each other, and slowly retreated together. Agon did not turn around to pursue, but directly fled far away and disappeared into the horizon. Charlotte tried her best, but could not keep the first genius of the orcs, and she felt very sorry. Agon's character is very difficult to change once he has made up his mind. Charlotte tried all kinds of words, but could not shake his rock-hard will, so she could only sigh in despair. Charlotte reappeared, and the old leopard man landed beside him and said, Agon didn't use the dragon hammer. If he had used the dragon hammer, his strength would have changed dramatically. Even if the golden goat Rolf and I joined forces, we might not be able to stop him. You'd better be mentally prepared. You've seen his temper. If he determines something, no one can change it. The next time he appears, it will be like a storm and thunder, and he will never show any mercy. Charlotte's eyes lit up and asked, he actually showed mercy? Domitian replied, he didn't even use the dragon hammer, so of course he showed some mercy. The old leopard man suddenly fell into deep thought and said, huh? It seems that he is indeed different from usual. Charlotte was overjoyed, slapped her thigh, and shouted, next time he comes, I guarantee that he will never come back and will never leave again. The old leopard man had a look of doubt on his face and obviously did not believe Charlotte's judgment. The golden Gothralf remained silent, but thought in his heart, when that elephant man comes back, he will definitely kill Charlotte, the bastard, with one punch. Why is he still coming back? He is just bragging. Charlotte rubbed her hands excitedly. He was not well versed in psychology, but from the old leopard man's words, he grasped a clue and said to himself, I have already broken his defense. I just need to make another effort. Before Charlotte finished speaking, a voice rang out from underground, shouting in a muffled voice, bullshit. A big hand broke through the ground, grabbed Charlotte's ankle, and then flew into the sky. The golden Gothralf and Domitian rushed to save Charlotte, but it was too late. They were afraid to use any grand gestures. Seeing the elephant man Agon carrying Charlotte all the way, they could only follow closely. The three of them were all wholly level, flying quickly, and crossed the red dragon strait in a blink of an eye. Charlotte was in the air, and suddenly realized, this elephant man is so cunning, pretending to escape, but actually escaping from a distance and hitting me by surprise. He took a deep breath, knowing that only his eloquence could protect him now, and whispered, Brother Agon, do you want to know why the Blood Clan wants to harm you? Charlotte didn't know why the Blood Clan wanted to frame the orcs, but he had to use a very thrilling topic to attract Agon's attention, so as to give himself a chance of survival. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.